Chapter 952. Mo Tianji's eyes shone brightly. He said word by word. The reason why I firmly believe that Chu Yang is not dead is because Chu Yang is very likely to be the Tribulation Sword Master who came out of this tribulation. The moment this sentence came out, it was simply earth-shattering. It was as if a bolt from the blue had suddenly struck the hearts of the brothers. In an instant, the brothers fell silent. Ji Mo's body trembled. Luo Kudi's body swayed. Ao Xie Yun suddenly turned to look at Mo Tianji. Xie Dan Qiong clutched his heart. A deathly silence. Master of Calamity Sword? Luo Kudi's lips trembled. The dragon-like Master of Calamity Sword? Is our boss? Mo Tianji said slowly. I'm not sure. However, based on all the signs, the possibility of Chu Yang being the Master of Calamity Sword is close to 70%. Ao Xie Yun and the rest also swayed. Mo Tianji's temper was never one to be full of promises. Normally, even if he was 100% sure of something, he would only say 80%. 80% was Mo Tianji's limit. Anything he did, he would always leave an unknown variable. Therefore, Mo Tianji always had a backup plan. Now, Mo Tianji said that the possibility of Chu Yang being the Master of Calamity Sword was close to 70%. Then, based on everyone's understanding of him, the possibility of Mo Tianji being the Master of Calamity Sword was close to 50%. Thinking of this, everyone felt dizzy. The Master of Calamity Sword was an eternal legend in the Heavenly Layer continent for 100,000 years. Every 10,000 years, there would be a Master of Calamity Sword who would come out to cleanse the Heavenly Layer continent. Every 10,000 years, there would be a Master of Calamity Sword who would come out to cleanse the Heavenly Layer continent. The ruling clan of the Upper Three Heavens was the clan that followed this brother of the Master of Calamity Sword. As long as they could follow the Master of Calamity Sword, they would bring 10,000 years of glory to their clan. Calamity Sword Master. The Heavenly Layer continent was the true ruler. Ao Xie Yun rubbed his forehead and said with a groan, "This is really unexpected. It feels as unreal as a dream. The brothers who usually drink, chat, fight, and joke with each other are the Tribulation Sword Masters who are high above the masses like gods." Xie Dan Qiong forced a smile. His handsome face was flushed with excitement. He wanted to control his emotions by force, but he couldn't. His whole body trembled as he said, "I cough, 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 cough." Qianghua, who had always been graceful and calm, was unable to say a word at this moment. She felt her throat was blocked by saliva. She kept coughing and clearing her throat, but she felt more and more phlegm in her throat. GMO trembled, and then trembled again. Finally, he moaned, "My pores are all open because of your words. They are shaking. Boss is the Master of Calamity Sword. I am going to defecate." Luo Kudi's legs went soft, and he almost fell on his butt. He suddenly burst into tears of joy. "I'm not dreaming, am I?" Mo Tianji's throat was also swallowing something. He had vaguely guessed it in his heart, but when he said it out loud, he still felt that indescribable excitement and speechless shock. He felt as if electricity was running through his body. It was really as GMO said, the pores all over his body were opened. He looked sideways and saw Gu Duxing holding the black dragon sword and standing at the side. He was actually expressionless. Mo Tianji was surprised. "Duxing, aren't you surprised at all?" A smile appeared on Gu Duxing's statue-like face like a spring breeze. His smile slowly widened. He let out a long breath and murmured, "So he is really not dead." Suddenly he laughed and said happily, "So he is really not dead." Without any warning, he punched Mo Tianji in the stomach and laughed. "So he is really not dead." Mo Tianji was caught off guard. This punch almost made his internal organs churn. He held his stomach and bent down. He shouted angrily, "Bastard! What are you doing?" Then, he saw Gu Duxing rushing over and hugging him. He laughed and jumped as he shouted, Big Brother is not dead. Boss is not dead. Ha! Mo Tianji's stomach was in pain from his punch, but he was still affected by his sincere feelings. He smiled and said, "Yes, he is not dead. He is not dead." Ha! Gu Duxing laughed. Net after he had vented his emotions a little, Mo Tianji groaned and asked, "Duxing, did you already know that Big Brother is the master of Calamity Sword?" Gu Duxing smiled. He leaned on his sword and said, "I have been with Boss for the longest time. I always felt that he was not ordinary. But I never thought of digging up his secrets. I had a feeling that he was the master of the Calamity Sword, but I was not sure." He smiled. "It doesn't matter. Whether he is the master of the Calamity Sword or an ordinary person, he is still Chu Yang. He is our brother. Since that is the case, what does it matter if he is the master of the Calamity Sword?" Gu Duxing smiled and said, "I never doubt my brother, and I don't want to dig up his secrets. On this point, Dong Wushang should have the same temperament as me." Mo Tianji pondered. After a long time, he said, "Yes, you are more honest than me." Gu Duxing smiled and shook his head. He said, "Everyone has their own feelings and missions. Your specialty is scheming, and resourcefulness. If you're as real as I am, then the future of US brothers may not be as good." Mo Tianji laughed out loud. He laughed until tears came out of his eyes. "Duxing, this sentence of yours is the most interesting sentence I have ever heard." Gu Duxing chuckled. On the side, GMO grabbed Luo Kudi. "Second young Master Luo, did you hear that? If Boss is the master of the Calamity Sword, won't our clan be able to survive for 10,000 years? Luo Kudi was also excited. "Yes." But then their faces fell. Luo Kudi said with a sad face, "Now in the three heavens, my brother already sees me as a thorn in his side. If that is the case, doesn't it mean that I will have to endure for 10,000 years? What big clan?" Gu Duxing got angrier and angrier. "Big clan? Just the two of you, good-for-nothings? Now you are already planning that kind of thing? If you dare to talk nonsense again, I will break your legs one by one. Now that Boss is not here, who dares to mention big clan to me?" Gu Duxing said angrily. "You are rebelling." Luo Kudi and GMO kept quiet out of fear. GMO said, "I was just kidding, you can't even joke." Gu Duxing said angrily, "Are you following Boss because you want to become a big clan?" He felt the same way as he did back then. True brothers with affection. Even if you die, you have no regrets. If you don't have affection, even if you become a big clan, you will only be despised. After saying that, Gu Duxing glared at the two of them. "I know you are joking, but once this kind of thing is rooted in your heart, you will slowly fall from this team. Now you two go and practice. While you are practicing in this space, I will keep an eye on you. If your progress is slow, it means your heart is in a mess. If your heart is in a mess, it means you want to become a big clan again. Yes, I will find you at any time to have a good talk and learn from each other." GMO and Luo Kudi cried out at the same time. "You are really kidding." But Gu Duxing had already turned around. He ignored them. GMO sighed. "What should we do?" "It is all your fault." Luo Kudi covered his butt and sighed. "Second brother Gu is like this. Let's practice well. After a few days we will join hands to beat him up ruthlessly and turn him into a soft second brother. That will be all." GMO laughed out loud. Then, he suddenly remembered something. He fiercely slapped Luo Kudi's buttocks, and said as if he had suddenly realized something, "I understand now." Luo Kudi was slapped on his wound. He was in so much pain that he wanted to die. He frowned. "Fuck! What are you doing?" GMO said gloomily. "I just remembered that Boss doesn't take oaths seriously. Once something happens, he will say, 'I swear in the name of Calamity Sword, ***. Now I understand that Boss was just playing with his mouth. We all know that swearing in the name of Calamity Sword is the most important oath in the heavenly layer. Who would have thought that that guy is the master of Calamity's sword? GMO didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The master of Calamity's sword controls the Calamity sword, and the master of Calamity's sword swears in the name of Calamity's sword. Isn't that just bullshit? No wonder Boss is so relaxed. He just opened his mouth and said it. Before, I was worried that Boss would just say one sentence whenever he opened his mouth. This is too casual. Now I know that everything Boss said was bullshit. Luo Kudi covered his butt and laughed. Boss is really interesting. Gu Duxing frowned. Why haven't I heard Boss mention this before? GMO said angrily. You're just a taciturn person. Does Boss need to swear in front of you? Damn it, last time in the far north wastelands, Boss and I were arguing about the gender of a snow wolf. Boss said, I swear in the name of Calamity Sword that this snow wolf is female. Then I spent a lot of effort to catch it, but it was male. Boss said that it wasn't the one he was talking about. The one he was talking about was obviously female. Fuck, catching a snow wolf in the far north wastelands. Look at how fast the snow wolf runs. Everyone was laughing so hard that they fell over. Catching a snow wolf in the far north wastelands. This guy really made them speechless. Luo Kudi said, twitching all over. Boss is asking you to practice your lightness techniques. Mo Tianji cleared his throat and said, Everyone, stop fooling around. Chu Yang is right not to tell us. After all, we're not strong enough. Once our identities are revealed, we'll be doomed eternally. The reason why I'm telling you now is because we can't get out of here. I'm just giving you guys something to think about. Secondly, it's also because of this heavenly origin energy. Such a huge piece of it, at least tens of thousands of pounds. If it all turns into spiritual energy and turns into cultivation, even if we split it evenly, everyone can at least reach the high level of martial saint. This is the lowest estimate. In this way, even in the upper three heavens, we'll have the power to protect ourselves. So, the main task now is to practice martial arts. Mo Tianji said seriously. Don't stop practicing martial arts. Start immediately. When we come out of seclusion, it'll be time for us to kill our way up to the upper three heavens. In the afternoon, the deputy moderator gave me a link. I clicked on it and saw that it was Long Meng's comments on other books. Suddenly, my heart felt warm. I was silent for a long time and couldn't say a word. Long Meng has done his best. He's done everything he can. I, Fengling, am eternally grateful for this kindness. Although we've never met, never talked, and never had any contact, at this moment, I really want to have a drink with you. I didn't specifically thank you for your tips, but these few posts made my heart burn. Thank you, my brother! In these 2 days, many of my brothers have deeply moved me. Many of them have specially come from pirated books to support me. Some of them have even tipped me before I reach V, just for the monthly votes of the Proud World. I'm touched. The Proud World has never been as popular as it was these few days. But these few days, it's completely boiling. I want to say, with brothers like you, I, Fengling, am worth it. The world of pride belongs to everyone. Just like what a friend said, the Proud World has come to this day, and you're just an author. The fate of the Proud World is no longer decided by you. Wind dominates the world. The fate of Chu Yang is no longer decided by you. Wind dominates the world. And we have the final say. Yes, I admit that you have the final say. Everyone has the final say. Because this is our shared Proud World. Everyone's Proud World. Everyone, let's support it together. Right, leave it to me. Proud World, leave it to you. I'll go write the 4th chapter. I'm touched and unknowingly said so much. Please understand. Chapter 953. The day I come out of seclusion is the day I kill my way up to the heavens. Gu Duxing repeated slowly, his aura rising. Martial Yin Yang. But now that the heavens are completely sealed, how are we going to kill our way up? GMO said in distress. As long as Chu Yang is the master of the Calamity Sword, then Chu Yang will definitely open the seal. Mo Tianji's eyes were bright as he said, "This is the mission of the Master of the Calamity Sword. It is also inevitable after 10,000 years of reincarnation." All the brothers became silent. Although no one said anything, a faint fighting spirit surged out from them. "Practice! Practice!" Then, each of the brothers found a place and sat down beside the dragon. All of them breathed slowly and quietly. Before long, they had already entered a state where they forgot about everything around them. In the upper three heavens, preparations for the medicine banquet were underway. All the pharmacists and experts were gathering towards the south. Some had just set off, some were preparing, and some were already on their way. The upper three heavens had already started to slowly boil. The south was still covered in greenery, but in a wasteland extremely far away in the northwest, it was already cold and snowy. In the vast snow, there was someone crying in grief at this moment. It was Dong Wushang. Broken limbs and body parts filled the surroundings. The smell of blood rose to the sky. Dong Wushang knelt weakly on the snowy ground. Beside him, Mo Layer stood shakily. Her face was pale and her eyes were filled with tears. In front of her was Rui Butong's body, lying quietly. There was no sound. Dong Wushang leaned on his long saber, tears falling like rain. He was so choked that he couldn't speak at all. Since the establishment of the 4 3-persons hall, the three of them had been constantly taking on missions and fighting. Their battle records and cultivation were also constantly rising. The density of spiritual energy in the upper three heavens was completely different from that in the upper three heavens. Therefore, the cultivation of the three of them improved faster. Dong Wushang and Rui Butong's talents were quickly stimulated under such dense spiritual energy. 3 days ago, Dong Wushang had already rapidly rushed to 8th grade Saber Emperor. Because Rui Butong was an ordinary martial emperor, he was even faster than Dong Wushang, and was already a 2nd grade martial emperor. Net 7 by 24 hours uninterrupted update of pure TXT handwritten novel. When Mo Layer was in the upper three heavens, her starting point was slightly lower than Dong Wushang's. However, she was now a middle-grade martial emperor. Just the day before yesterday, Dong Wushang had accepted a mission to escort a stalk of spirit herb. The reward was 1,000 purple crystals. Dong Wushang and the other two discussed for a while before they set off excitedly. Little did they know that this stock of medicine was used for the medicine banquet and was extremely rare. Along the way, they had actually encountered wave after wave of interceptions. In the short span of 2 days, the three of them had already gone through 7 or 8 assassinations. Every time, it was filled with danger. For the last time, Dong Wushang fought madly, but he couldn't withstand the attacks of several monarch-level experts. He retreated in defeat and was in imminent danger. Mo Layer was also at a disadvantage, and she was trying her best to hold on. Rui Butong was even more clumsy, surrounded by dangers. However, at the most crucial moment, Rui Butong suddenly leaped up. While the 3 martial monarchs struck him with their palms at the same time, he desperately twisted the neck of that martial monarch expert. Then, he leaped up and faced the fatal longsword as he desperately hugged the strongest martial monarch expert opposite Dong Wushang. Dong Wushang stood there in a daze. His mind was still reverberating with Rui Butong's dying roar. "We can't all die. You and sister-in-law wait for boss to come up. Don't let them feel lonely and helpless when they come up. Strike. Even cut me into pieces. Kill." Ah! Dong Wushang fell to his knees with a thud, his tears gushing out like a fountain. "Elder! Butong!" Dong Wushang roared at the sky. His voice was hoarse, and blood kept coming out of his throat. He seemed to see Rui Butong roaring at him again, bathed in blood. At the moment when he struck with grief and indignation, a hint of a smile flashed across Rui Butong's eyes. And a few muffled words in his throat. "Wait for him. You wait. I'm happy, I know. You want me to wait for them. Wait for them to come up and let me fight with them." Dong Wushang roared at the sky. "But boss and Duxing came up, what should I say? What should I say? They asked me, 'Where is Elder?' What about Butong? What should I say? You just fucking lay here quietly. It's fine. But what should I do with a rotten stall? Dong Wushang roared with grief and indignation. Bastard! Bastard! As he scolded, hot tears rolled down his cheeks. Such a mighty and heroic man was sobbing uncontrollably at this moment. At the side, Mo Layer was crying silently. Web at the moment when Rui Butong flew out with blood all over his body, Mo Layer was really shocked. This Rui Butong, who was usually glib-tongued and even looked a little wretched, showed such heroism and determination at that moment. It was so shocking. So full of spirit. Men had their own hot blood. Usually, they wouldn't show it, but when the world was turbulent, and a man's hot blood gushed out, it was enough to move anyone. At a critical moment, when a man gave his all, it was enough to make everyone's heart surge. She clearly remembered that in the battle just now, Rui Butong had been paying attention to Dong Wushang's battle and her side from the corner of his eyes. And Dong Wushang's heavy gaze had also been paying attention to Rui Butong and her. These two men, at this moment, didn't say anything, but with their most sincere attitudes and actions, they told her what men were. So this was how a man's friendship was. Rui Butong was ready to sacrifice himself for his brother at any time. And Dong Wushang's gaze was the same. Both of them were ready to do that at any time. But just before Dong Wushang made his move, Rui Butong made his move in advance. When he made his move, the situation was just a hair's breadth away, not a moment of life and death. But Rui Butong couldn't wait any longer. He knew that when that moment came, he definitely wouldn't be as fast as Dong Wushang. This battle was very intense but also very short. The lineup of the three sides was very balanced. The opponents were individually in a kind of joint attack formation. The three battlefields intersected and cooperated with each other. Only the three monarch-level experts were the strongest, and could support each other at any time. As long as he could catch one of them off guard, then Dong Wushang would be able to break out of the encirclement immediately, and kill the rest with ease. But if Dong Wushang sacrificed himself, he wouldn't be able to kill all of them at the same time. So if anyone were to die, it would be him. So Rui Butong made his move in advance. He couldn't let Dong Wushang make his move first. Sure enough, Rui Butong's sacrifice was to risk his own life to kill one of them and break the formation. Then, he used his own life to hold on to another one. And to reduce most of the obstacles for Dong Wushang. Dong Wushang instantly broke free like a flood dragon. Carrying intense grief and indignation, his dark saber instantly transformed into a wild dragon that could overturn rivers and seas. He didn't hesitate to self-destruct, and used the fastest speed to kill everyone. Then, he immediately arrived beside Rui Butong. But at that time, Rui Butong was already unable to speak. He was only panting weakly. With a clear smile in his eyes, with peace and ease, he looked deeply at Dong Wushang, as if he wanted to engrave his brother in his mind forever. Then, he smiled and his lips moved. Dong Wushang thought he was going to speak and moved closer to listen. But he was no longer breathing. He was so calm that it was as if he had fallen asleep. Wushang, don't be sad. If Butong knew in the underworld, he wouldn't want. Mo Layer's tears fell like rain as she tried to persuade Dong Wushang. Dong Wushang shuddered and suddenly burst into tears. My brother doesn't want me to be sad, but this is my brother. But this is my brother. But this is my brother. He even smiled at me just now. He even smiled just now. How can he die? Dong Wushang pushed Mo Layer to one side in a rage. He lost his mind and yelled. How can my brother die? I still want to be with him, and wait for my brothers to come up. Together, we can laugh proudly in the martial world. Together, we can dance in the clouds and look down on the world. Carve our names in the heavenly imperial court. Rui Butong! You promised. You promised us. You can't go back on your words. You can't go back on your words. Dong Wushang shook Rui Butong's body madly and yelled crazily. There was still a calm smile on Rui Butong's face. He swayed weakly as Dong Wushang shook him. Snowflakes landed on his face and actually stuck to it silently, no longer melting. Ah! Dong Wushang yelled at the sky. He spat out a mouthful of blood and let go of his hands weakly. Rui Butong's body fell weakly onto the snowy ground. And Dong Wushang's tall and sturdy body also fell stiffly to the ground like a golden mountain toppling over a jade pillar. Mo Layer burst into tears. She first supported Rui Butong's body and then went to help Dong Wushang. But it was already too late. With a loud crash, Dong Wushang fell solidly onto the snowy ground. The vast snowy plains seemed to shake violently because of his burly body falling onto the ground. Mo Layer's tears fell like rain. She couldn't help Dong Wushang first. She knew that if she didn't care about Rui Butong's body and help Dong Wushang, the first thing Dong Wushang would do when he woke up would be to be separated from her forever. No one knew better than her how much this man valued his brothers. A day passed. Ever since Dong Wushang woke up, he sat motionlessly in front of Rui Butong's body and muttered something. He still couldn't accept that his brother was already dead. He forced all the medicine into Rui Butong's body. Including the few incomplete heavy pills that Chu Yang gave him, there were still 3 left. They were all stuffed into Rui Butong's mouth. "This is Boss's miracle medicine. It can cure all injuries," Dong Wushang said hopefully. "Wake up quickly. Wake up quickly." Mo Layer shed tears secretly. She was about to persuade him when she suddenly heard Dong Wushang's exclamation of joy. She hurriedly turned around in shock and saw that the ice and snow where Rui Butong was lying was actually starting to melt and turn into water. Moreover, waves of heat were rising. Dong Wushang jumped out and pointed from afar. He laughed loudly and shouted, "Look, he's not dead! I'm not beside him! His body is heating up!" Then, he jumped back and said with a trembling voice, my brother is alive!" Mo Layer's eyes widened. This matter was too strange. He had already been dead for a day and a night, and his body was already stiff. Being able to come back from the dead was really unheard of. Under the gaze of the two of them, Rui Butong's body temperature on the ground became higher and higher. Slowly, it actually started to turn red. Finally, with a whoosh, a ball of fire suddenly appeared on his body. The fire kept coming out, and in an instant, it was already a huge fire that soared into the sky. "Phoenix Nirvana?" Mo Layer's mind flashed, and she suddenly blurted out. Then, she was so shocked by her own words that she covered her mouth. "Tomorrow is the last day of this month, the last day of this month. The single chapter will be published later. G." Chapter 954. Rui Butong's body, which was lying flat, suddenly burst into flames. At first, one could still see the outline of his body in the flames, but after an instant, the flames suddenly rose and became white, completely enveloping Rui Butong's body. Dong Wushang was too close. With a whoosh, a piece of hair on his forehead was burned off. He hurriedly retreated to avoid it. Net 7 by 24 hours non-stop update pure TXT handwritten novel. The next moment, Mo Lei exclaimed, "Be careful!" She flew over and dragged Dong Wushang down to the ground. She slid out on the snowy ground for 100 feet. Then, she got up and pulled Dong Wushang to run. After running for 300 feet, when she turned back, she saw that the place where Rui Butong was at was already covered in flames. A red light shot up into the sky. The flames had already turned red. Completely red. The burning heaven and earth were covered in blood red. At this moment, all the clouds in the sky were dyed with a layer of dazzling light. Such a fire, not to mention burning a person's body, even if the whole world was burned together, it definitely wouldn't have such power. Dong Wushang stared blankly. What's going on?" Mo Layer stared at the red light without blinking and said, "Nirvana flame!" Dong Wushang immediately understood. Suddenly, his eyes widened. "You mean? Butong, he's actually a phoenix?" Mo Lei frowned. "How can you say that? It might be true that he has the awakened phoenix bloodline in his body. As for him being a phoenix, Is there such a wretched phoenix in this world? But no matter what, he won't die. You can rest assured. Dong Wushang rubbed his hands and said excitedly. That's great. Whether he's a phoenix or a pig, he won't die at last. When he wakes up, I'll beat this bastard to death. Fuck! I was scared to death. The flames burned fiercely and shot up into the sky. This fire burned for 3 days straight. However, except for the ice and snow on the ground that melted a little when it started to heat up, after 3 days of burning, the rest of the ice and snow actually didn't melt at all. A wave of rugged divine power surged out. Martial Yin Yang, this fire had alarmed too many people. Countless experts saw the anomaly and wanted to come over to take a look. However, he discovered that he couldn't enter at all. As long as he was within a radius of 100 miles, he would not be able to take another step forward. No matter what your cultivation is, you can't even take a step closer. Only Dong Wushang and Mo Layer, who were only 300 feet away, only felt warm and comfortable. Within a radius of 100 li, there were already quite a number of people gathering. Slowly, more and more people gathered. There was definitely a great change in the world. If it wasn't the Tribulation Sword Master, then it was definitely a treasure that had been unearthed. This was the common understanding of everyone. Everyone was waiting for this terrifying pressure to pass, then they would all rush forward. As the host, the Li clan had gathered even more people. Everyone was nervous. This time, would it be an opportunity? Then, in the next moment, everyone stared at the sky in shock. The clouds in the sky moved, surging like a tsunami. Then, the place where the red light was suddenly turned into a huge whirlpool, stirring slowly in the center of the entire sky. As he stirred, all of the heaven and earth spiritual chi in the surroundings began to gather at a faster and faster speed. Suddenly, with a shio sound, all of the spiritual chi within a radius of 1,000 miles disappeared without a trace. At this moment, even those people at the periphery suddenly felt suffocated. In the next moment, the wind rose and the clouds surged in the horizon. Countless amounts of pure spiritual energy crazily rushed over with a speed as fast as lightning. The spiritual energy instantly filled up the empty space in the sky. Then, it was absorbed again in an instant. Once again, it rushed over from all directions. Rushed over. The red light became brighter and brighter, stronger and stronger. The whole sky formed a whole patch of burning clouds. At the moment when the spiritual energy suddenly surged over, a red light shot out from Rui Budong's body, enveloping Dong Wushang and Mo Lei as well. Then, the two of them simultaneously felt that all the pores on their bodies suddenly opened at the same time. Countless spiritual energy rushed into their bodies from every pore. At the same time, there was a numb and itchy feeling in their dantian, as if the sea of energy in their dantian was gradually expanding under a mysterious force. The meridians in their bodies were also expanding rapidly. Gradually, the inner energy in their bodies surged wildly. The two of them were shocked. They hurriedly sat down cross-legged and meditated. They only felt that their cultivation was increasing rapidly. On the 5th day, Martial Yin Yang, a clear phoenix cry suddenly resounded through the sky. With a boom, the spiritual energy exploded and rushed up. The fiery red spiritual energy let out another clear phoenix cry in midair. A huge phoenix suddenly took shape in the sky. The fiery red wings seemed to be slowly spreading out, but they had not spread out yet. A red light suddenly exploded in the endless sky, turning into countless small red dots, scattering in the air in all directions of the continent. The spiritual energy in the world seemed to have gone crazy, rushing towards this newly formed phoenix. It seemed to be using a huge amount of spiritual energy to grow the phoenix's wings. It's a phoenix! A supreme martial artist leading the Li clan shouted in shock. Quick! Quickly report to the Elder Master! In the northeast direction, a person with a sun mark on his forehead was standing with his hands behind his back, looking at the northwest sky. Suddenly, he frowned and shouted, "The phoenix has been born!" Beside him, many people exclaimed, "What?" This person frowned and muttered, "The phoenix has been born, But why hasn't the golden dragon appeared yet? Beside him, countless people were looking up at the red in the sky. Their gazes were complicated, and there was actually an indescribable feeling of trembling. Everyone was trembling slightly as they watched and waited. The dragon soars into the sky, the phoenix spreads its wings, the saint king is born, and the world cries. That person stared at the red in the sky and suddenly said in a low voice, "King! Where are you now?" At the same time, all the birds in the world suddenly went crazy. Countless birds soared into the sky and circled around without hesitation. Then, they flapped their wings and rushed toward the northwest direction. Often, when a bird flew out, it would be alone. But after flying out for a few li, it would have turned into a huge group of colorful birds. Slowly, they would form a majestic army. Using all of their strength, they would increase their speed and head northwest at the fastest speed possible. Flying rapidly. Among these pairs of birds, there were even quite a few that were natural enemies. But now, they all flew together harmoniously and lined up neatly, from big to small, from weak to strong. They didn't even look at each other, not to mention killing each other. The phoenix's wings finally opened slowly and moved slowly. Suddenly, a scorching whirlwind blew between heaven and earth. The spiritual energy was rapid and dense. The glaciers within a radius of 100 miles started to melt. Only the one in the middle didn't melt. The glaciers in the periphery were still melting. The people in the periphery retreated step by step. In the end, they started to run. However, the speed of the glaciers melting became faster and faster. When they finally stopped, there was already a vast ocean in front of them. Countless birds nearby had already started to fly over and dance in the sky above the ocean. Each of them displayed their most beautiful dance moves, as if celebrating. The entire heavenly layer shook. At this moment, suddenly, a loud and clear dragon's roar resounded through heaven and earth. In the sky, there was a loud boom of thunder. The entire earth was trembling rapidly. Countless people and animals were stunned by this thunderous roar. In the distant sky, a golden light seemed to rise from the ground and rushed into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the sky was golden. The image of a huge golden dragon floated in the air. Suddenly it raised its head and let out a loud and clear dragon's roar. Then, it suddenly disappeared. In the northeast direction, in a distant place, everyone knelt down at the same time, their eyes brimming with tears. The dragon soars into the sky, the phoenix spreads its wings. When the Holy King appears, heaven and earth cry. Too many people murmured together, "King!" Finally, today, the dragon and the phoenix appear together. "King, where are you?" 3 days in the glaciers of the extreme south. Tan, who was cultivating, suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky. The sky was golden and fiery red. Tan's eyes lit up, and he murmured, "Has it started?" Then, a dense black aura suddenly emerged from his body. In an instant, his entire body was shrouded in black gas, in the far north wastelands. In the secret land of the elves, Dooku extended his body and rushed out of the cave at the fastest speed. In a flash, he was already standing on the highest peak, looking up. His expression was excited, and his body was trembling a little. "It has finally started!" Dooku chuckled and took out an exquisite green box from his chest. He opened it carefully and looked inside. Inside there was something that looked like a seed covered in a green halo. Dooku pinched it with 2 fingers and looked at it with a complicated expression. He let out a long sigh and slowly put this seed into his mouth. Then, he disappeared in a flash. In all directions of the continent, all the experts were looking at the northwest at this moment. They were looking at the sky. Even those who had been in seclusion for thousands of years came out one after another. They stood at the highest point of the place and looked at the sky. At the top of the law enforcement city's clock tower, a man in white stood in the wind and looked at the sky in the distance silently. Over there, the red light was dazzling. "The phoenix has come out," the man in white murmured. At this moment, his eyes were as sharp as a knife. In a moment, a golden color appeared in the clouds. "The dragon clan has come out." The man in white's face became serious. After a while, a green light rushed into the sky and stood together with the red and yellow lights. It seemed that a hodgepodge had suddenly appeared in the sky. The elf clan! The man in white sighed and murmured, "Are all the clans going to be revived?" Immediately after, a dense black light suddenly appeared in the sky with the attitude of a ruler descending upon the world. It appeared in the middle of the green, red, and yellow lights. It swayed and churned, majestic and mighty. The white-robed man's face, which had been calm all this time, suddenly revealed an intense shock. In fact, there was even a faint sense of fear. Today's first update. I forgot that today is the Lantern Festival. Dad called me, so I hurried home and kowtowed in front of the ancestral tablets. Then I came back without stopping. I will continue to write the second update. There are less than 7 hours left. The bayonet has already seen red. After working hard for a month, it will be fixed. We are still lagging behind. I am still fighting. I will never give up. Chapter 955. This is demonic aura. It's holy aura again. The man in white narrowed his eyes and frowned. Which clan is this? Which clan? Could it be? Could it be? Deep worry appeared on the man in white's face. Heaven and earth cry. Heaven and earth cry. Is there really going to be chaos in the world? A clear sound rang out like the music of heavenly beings. That huge phoenix's wings were finally fully spread out. In an instant, green light intertwined and rose tens of thousands of feet. Golden light flashed across thousands of miles. Only a cloud of black aura remained unmoving. Too many birds from all directions also flew into the sky above the ocean. They danced on this ocean that had never appeared in the northwest region. At the moment when the phoenix spread its wings, it also stopped in the sky. The phoenix spread its wings and rushed up with a resounding phoenix cry. It pierced through the clouds. At the moment when the phoenix soared into the sky, all the birds fell silent. They quietly and respectfully prostrated and lowered their proud heads. He wanted to show his incomparable respect to his king. The phoenix soared into the sky and turned into a colorful cloud in the sky. Then, the colorful cloud dissipated and turned into a rosy glow. Finally, it disappeared. The golden dragon let out a long cry and also disappeared without a trace in an instant. The green light flickered for a moment before disappearing. Only that thick black aura was still surging in the sky. Then, the black aura suddenly surged and slowly turned into a blurry human figure. His face couldn't be seen clearly. He just stood in the void, with the sky above his head and the mountains below his feet. This figure slowly turned around and faced the northeast. He seemed to be looking, as if he was deep in thought, as if he was. Then, this black aura slowly dissipated and turned into a sky full of dark clouds. Dark clouds covered the sky. A shocking thunderbolt sounded, and a shining silver snake came from the sky to the ground. The torrential rain covered the entire heavenly layer as it poured down. In the northeast, when the figure turned around, everyone knelt down neatly on the ground, trembling and crying tears of joy. Millions of people shouted at the same time, "King! King! King! My king is back!" Their voices shook the world. Heavy rain poured down. The place where Dong Wushang, Mo Lei, and Rui Badong were at was already an isolated island. In fact, they were floating on the surface of the water. Countless icebergs were drifting back and forth, making the small island they were on look like a grain of sand in the middle of the ocean. It was so inconspicuous. The experts in the periphery had already begun to cut wood and build boats. Who knew that there would be a day where they would need to use boats in the northwest? Other than icebergs, there was a snowfield. Tall mountains stood in great numbers, and steep ridges crisscrossed the area. It had always been difficult for carriages to travel, so ordinary people usually used sleds. Who would have thought that one day, he would actually take a boat? Why would he need a boat? How would these people know how the ship was made? He busied himself for half a day but still couldn't get it up. Then, he saw that someone had already gone into the water. Everyone looked over and saw that those guys were spinning on the surface of the water like a top, unable to move an inch forward. He couldn't help but burst into laughter. These people had shaved off one side of the big tree, removed all the branches, and dug a hole in the trunk of the big tree. The three of them sat on it, one in the middle and two at the two ends, each holding a branch and paddling. But after a while, relying on their high cultivation, they actually only spun on the surface of the water for more than 100 rounds before adjusting their direction and rushing out. They actually swayed in the wind and waves, twisting and turning like penguins as they floated out. Fuck! This was really a good idea. Just now, everyone was still laughing at them when they saw them spinning in circles. But now, it seemed that they really had foresight. In such a godforsaken place, how could there be any boats? So everyone followed suit. Almost in an instant, all the big trees at the side were chopped down. There were even people who started fighting over a big tree, and the fight was in full swing. The people on the surface of the water were all spinning in circles, and it was extremely crowded. Sometimes, with a bang, two tree boats would collide with each other as they spun, and people on both sides would fall into the water at the same time. Then, the people at the side would either intentionally or unintentionally use the oars made of tree branches to hit them on the head. What a joke! A phoenix would never land on a land without treasures. What's more, this was the birth of a phoenix. There would definitely be countless treasures. With such a good opportunity, how could they not take advantage of it and eliminate their competitors in advance? How could they leave it to harm themselves in the future? So, the sounds of beating and scolding rang out continuously. There was a commotion, and a few more tree boats rushed out, swaying and drifting far away. Then, more and more people went out. The most tragic ones were the few supreme martial artists who wanted to rely on their high cultivation to cross the water. They flew up elegantly, floating in a kind of elegant posture, and were about to rush out fiercely. But just as they flew up, a huge pressure came down on them. The few supreme martial artists instantly lost all their strength and fell down like dumplings, landing on their backs in a sorry state. The most impressive thing was that one of the supreme martial artists actually fell to the ground and had a nosebleed. This was really too embarrassing. One must know that this was the legend of the heavens. A supreme martial artist. Although he was only a first-grade supreme martial artist, he was still a legendary figure. Not to mention falling, even if a big hammer smashed his nose, it would only make a hole in his nose. Now, he actually fell from a place that wasn't very high, and even his nose was bleeding. Heavy rain poured down, and the supreme martial artist's blood flowed down. He reached out to touch his face, and his face was covered in blood. Everyone wanted to laugh, but no one dared to. The few supreme martial artists climbed up with dusty faces, only to find that after landing, their cultivation had returned. They couldn't help but look at each other. It seemed that they could only row the boats, on the ice island. Dong Wushang and Mo Layer felt that they could move again and jumped up. Dong Wushang didn't care about how much his cultivation had increased. He went to Rui Budong's side in one step and looked at him worriedly. He saw that Rui Budong's face was rosy, lying there, his chest rising and falling slowly. He was indeed fine. Such a fierce fire burned the sky red, but Rui Budong's clothes didn't burn at all. Dong Wushang was still in disbelief. He reached out a trembling hand to feel Rui Budong's breath. At this moment, Rui Budong, who was lying on the ground, actually opened his eyes. Dong Wushang actually got a shock. Rui Budong opened his eyes, closed them, and then opened them again. He blinked and his pupils gradually focused. He actually gave a vulgar smile and his first sentence was actually, "Old Fourth, you're scared out of your wits, aren't you?" Dong Wushang stood there in a daze, unable to react for a long time. He blinked and suddenly, tears fell crazily. Then, without any hesitation, he punched Rui Budong's left eye hard. Poof! A panda eye was born immediately. Rui Budong was in great pain. "Fuck you!" Before he finished speaking, Dong Wushang's second punch had already come over mercilessly. Poof! Rui Budong completely transformed into a panda. Dong Wushang's punches were powerful and heavy. Without saying a word, He gritted his teeth and puffed up his cheeks as he punched again and again. Rui Badong was finally enraged. He flipped over and got up. The two of them took turns punching each other. Not long after, two brand new pig heads were born. He lay on the ice, panting heavily. Until now, no one spoke. After a long time, Rui Badong moaned. "Does it feel good?" Dong Wushang panted. "Yes. I feel very good too," Rui Badong said. The two of them stopped talking and just panted. After a while, they suddenly burst into laughter in unison. Those who had died once didn't have the surprise of coming back from the dead. Those who had been crying in regret also didn't say anything about their brothers coming back from the dead. Everything was as usual. It was as if this incident had never happened before. Mo Layer watched from the side. She had always felt that she was a genius and could understand everything. Moreover, she could also feel and understand friendship. But at this moment, she felt that she understood men less and less. The friendship between men was indeed very strange. Something happened to Rui Badong, and Dong Wushang was devastated. This was very easy to understand. But Rui Badong came back from the dead, yet Dong Wushang didn't seem very moved. Mo Layer felt that if it were a woman, they would probably be hugging each other and crying right now. But these two men actually fought fiercely without protecting each other. After beating each other into a pig's head, everything would be over? After the laughter, Rui Badong said in a low voice. "Actually, I don't know about this either." Dong Wushang lay on the ground, stroking the wounds on his face contentedly, the corners of his mouth twitching in pain. "I understand. Okay." Rui Badong didn't say anything either. Both of them were checking their own cultivation. Such an important matter, and they didn't mention it again. "I've improved," Rui Badong said. "I'm afraid I've already reached the first or second stage of the saint level." "Me too. It's about the same. But I still need to practice the saber and increase my understanding of the way of the saber before I can reach the level of a saber saint. This will still take a long time," Dong Wushang said lightly. "I've improved too." Mo Layer checked herself in surprise. "Huh!" Dong Wushang and Rui Badong looked at her in shock. "You gave birth too? Where? Is it a boy or a girl?" Mo Layer reacted instantly. Embarrassed and angry, she put her hands on her waist. "You two bastards!" Rui Badong laughed loudly. "You didn't give birth to us two bastards. It's not nice of you to say that. It doesn't matter to me. If you gave birth to me, then so be it. I can call you mother now, but not Fourth. If Fourth calls you mother, you won't be able to get married." Mo Layer's face and ears turned red. She went forward to beat this guy up. But Rui Badong actually leaned forward. "Mother, I'm hungry. I want to drink milk." Before he finished, he was beaten half to death by Dong Wushang and Mo Layer. He lay on the ice and couldn't do anything other than moan. The three of them looked at each other and laughed. Mo Layer had also advanced to the saint level. The three of them were of the same level. This proved one thing: in the Nirvana flame just now, Rui Badong had shared all the benefits that should have been his alone with Dong Wushang and Mo Layer. He could have gone all the way to the supreme level. Because he had the phoenix physique, all the benefits were tailor-made for him. Not only would it be a waste for Dong Wushang and Mo Layer, it wouldn't achieve the best results. But he still did it. When Rui Badong came back from the dead, he only said, "I don't know either." And that was it. Dong Wushang didn't ask either. He used the Nirvana flame to share all the benefits equally with Dong Wushang and Mo Layer. This kind of friendship was enough to move heaven and earth. But Dong Wushang didn't say it either. Not only did he not say it, but he also didn't allow Mo Layer to say it either. This matter, if it was said, would be lighter. If this kind of sacrifice was said verbally, it would really be an insult to feelings. Today's writing was especially slow. Haha, you should also understand how I feel. My 3 years of hard work will come to an end tonight. Treat it as a gift for myself next month, and also a gift for Pride's anniversary. As for why I'm giving it to myself, Let's talk about it after the monthly votes battle. Today, everyone is persuading me to write 10 chapters. I also want to write 10 chapters. I know better than anyone that if I write 10 chapters today, it will be an assured victory. But I really can't do it anymore. This month, I've almost broken myself. Even if I die, I can't write anymore. How about this? I'll still write 10 chapters today. No matter who comes in first or second, this is a promise. I'll write double the chapters next month. My heart is beating like a drum now, I'm sweating all over, and even my fingers are trembling. I don't know if I can write the third and fourth chapters. If there are 3 chapters, I'll owe 7 chapters. I'll write 14 chapters next month. If there are 4 chapters, I'll owe 12 chapters. If there are only 2 chapters, I'll write 10 chapters next month. Victory or defeat depends on this battle. A victory is a victory, a defeat is a defeat. If I win, I have to win fair and square. If I lose, I have to lose in a soul-stirring manner. No matter if I win or lose, I can take it. Maybe I'll cry if I win, but if I lose, I can still laugh. Because I'm the one who rules the world. I'll fight with all my might. Chapter 956. Noises could be heard from afar. The 3 of them looked back and saw huge trees riding the wind and waves toward them. It had to be said that these martial arts experts were really good at understanding things. Otherwise, they wouldn't have become experts. Now, they were riding the hollow tree trunks without sails and were actually in high spirits. They were like huge sea cucumbers but could move forward at the speed of a barracuda. But upon closer look, they knew that these people weren't rowing boats at all. They were obviously riding the boat in the way of a sled. Rui Batong, Dong Wushang, and Mo Lei were all dumbfounded. The 3 of them thought that they were experienced and knowledgeable, but this was the first time they had seen such a strange scene. The wisdom of the people is endless, Dong Wushang murmured. I've proven this sentence once again. Rui Batong said. Yes, look at them. How lively! They're really like a group of children playing with water. Mo Lei trembled. Indeed, these martial arts experts, who were mostly white-haired and bearded, had all kinds of strange postures when they rowed the boat. The shape of the boat could also be said to be colorful. Especially on one boat, the 2 people were actually leaning to the left. At the same time, they rowed to the left, and the tree boat tilted to the left. Then, the 2 of them hurriedly rowed to the right, and the tree boat tilted to the right again. The surrounding tree boats all stayed far away from the 2 of them, fearing that they would bump into them. However, these 2 experts had actually used such a method to barge their way through. They were like giant crabs, and they had actually reached the depths of the ocean. What a freaking weirdo! Rui Batong murmured to himself. Phoenixes don't land on places without treasures. The birth of phoenixes must be full of treasures. These people are here to look for treasures or little phoenixes. Mo Lei looked at Rui Batong with some worry. Rui Batong shrugged and said indifferently, The phoenixes have already left. They're looking for the phoenixes, not me. What does that have to do with anything? Besides, do I look like a phoenix to you? Have you seen a phoenix as handsome as me? Dong Wushang couldn't help bursting into laughter. Tan Tan is much more handsome than you. Rui Batong tightly knitted his brows. He then angrily said, You're comparing Tan Tan's appearance with mine. You're raping my personality. You're profaning my temperament. How dare you taint my demeanor? Molesting my purity. You're defiling me to death. Dong Wushang burst into laughter. What should we do next? Rui Batong said. 4th brother, you haven't heard of this before. This medicine is requested by the Song clan, a subordinate clan of the Li clan, so that the pharmacists can participate in the medicine banquet. What is this medicine banquet? Dong Wushang blinked. You're also very interested? I'm doing this for your sake, 4th brother. You want to hone your saber. What's the point of honing your saber in such a remote place? Rui Batong snickered. Let's go to the medicine banquet. I heard that the heroes of the world will gather there. Martial emperors are like ants, martial monarchs are like sand, martial saints are like dogs, and supreme martial artists are like mountains. He patted Dong Wushang's shoulder and said, Fourth brother, once we beat everyone there, we'll be invincible. Dong Wushang's eyes suddenly shone brightly. He murmured, Once we beat everyone there, we'll be invincible? Amo Layer was so nervous that her face turned pale. She knew that Roy Budong might be joking, but Dong Wushang's murmuring was definitely not a joke. It was definitely not a joke. He really wanted to beat everyone there to the ground. But before he could do that, Dong Wushang himself didn't know how many times he would have to go down and how many times he would have to die. She was just about to stop him when she heard Dong Wushang laugh heartily. He said, Since that's the case, after we hand in the mission this time, we'll directly get another mission to go to the medicine banquet. Let's beat them all down. Ray Budong burst into laughter. And me! Both of you are crazy! Amo Layer muttered and cursed anxiously. But not only was she influenced by the fighting spirit of the two brothers, her eyes also shone brightly. How could the young black devil be willing to be ordinary? In the past, because of the limitation of her abilities and because of her unstable relationship with Dong Wushang, Amo Layer had always been blocked by Dong Wushang and Ray Budong. She was willing to be a little woman behind her man's back and take charge of all the trivial matters. But now that her man had such lofty ambitions, how could she, his woman, just watch him do nothing? If you want to be a hero of Lingtian, then of course I also want to be a matchless beauty. Only then can I be worthy of you. When I'm by your side, I want you to be proud of me. In a thatched hut in the middle of a forest, a man dressed like a scholar was in front of the hut, drinking tea leisurely and contentedly. His expression was very indifferent, as if he didn't care about anything. His whole person exuded a natural and unrestrained aura. Once one saw him, they would immediately feel that the sky was high and the clouds were light, as if everything was drifting away like a breeze. After drinking a cup of tea, he stood up slowly. After taking 2 steps, he muttered, Medicine banquet, should I go or not? Casually catching a piece of bread that drifted over, he smiled warmly. Of course you should go. Because Chuchin is going, and so are the people from the Yi clan. He smiled and floated up like a cloud. He floated down the mountain like this, not looking back. Before he made a decision, he would pass his days here peacefully. But once he made a decision, he would set off immediately without any hesitation. He would follow his heart and do whatever he wanted. This was for transcendence. When the sky changed, Chu Yang was still 500 miles away from the headquarters of the Zhuge clan. It was noon. Chu Yang and Ling Hanwu were talking. Chu Luo was sleeping soundly on Zi Xieching's body. Zi Xieching and Ling Hanxue, this pair of ice beauties, were also talking in their unique way. Suddenly, they felt the spiritual energy of heaven and earth go berserk. The few of them were shocked. When they went out together and stood at the highest point, they realized that there were already many people looking up. Everyone was speechless when they saw the various strange scenes that appeared in the sky. When they came up, they didn't know that this strange phenomenon would actually last for such a long time. They actually stood there for a few days. Until the end, no one spoke. When the yellow, green, red and black aura dissipated, and the heavy rain poured down, everyone was completely drenched. Only then did they return to their rooms somewhat absent-mindedly. Chu Yang frowned along the way. Others had already entered their rooms, but he was still strolling alone in the rain. This strange phenomenon was definitely not the sort of calamity, and he hadn't seen it before. But why did those few auras feel so intimate and familiar to him? That beam of black light definitely had an aura of evil, but strangely, it also had an aura of righteousness. The evil aura was filled with complicated familiarity and intimacy. At that moment, Chu Yan even thought of his own junior brother Tan Tan. It was so complicated. They should have the same personality, but they were so opposite to each other, each walking on 2 extremes. Wasn't it just like Tan Tan? In everyone's eyes, he was extremely ugly, but he himself was extremely narcissistic. You clearly value your relationship to the point of death, but you force yourself to act as if you don't care. You clearly use extremely evil means, but you do righteous things. Yet, you use a kind of honorable means to achieve your wretched goals. Damn it! Chu Yang shook his head and smiled bitterly. As he shook his head, the rainwater scattered from his face into the curtain of rain. And that mysterious green light also felt familiar to Chu Yang. Even that pressure that appeared at that time reminded Chu Yang of the atmosphere he felt when he was in Duke Yu's secret place of the elves. Chu Yang felt even more familiar with the red light. The moment the red light rushed up, it reminded Chu Yang of Rui Butong's aura when he broke through in the far north wastelands and was reborn. And the phoenix that soared up afterwards made Chu Yang even more certain. This red light was most likely related to Rui Butong. Because Rui Butong was now in the upper three heavens. As for the image of the golden dragon, Chu Yang thought of Ao Shiyun. He knew that Ao Shiyun had the bloodline of the dragon race. Could it be related? But then Chu Yang smiled bitterly and thought, if the heaven and earth phenomena that appeared at the same time were all related to his brother, then wouldn't it be a little too wishful thinking? Inside, the people of the Ling clan were already in a heated discussion. Chu Yang stood alone in the rain, deep in thought. The only one who noticed him was Zi Xieching. Even Ling Hanwu was also excitedly participating in the discussion. After all, every time such a situation happened, it meant that the world was about to change. I dare to bet that the Tribulation Sword Master has definitely found the fifth fragment of the Tribulation Sword, a martial saint expert of the Ling clan said confidently. If it can be proven otherwise, I will strip naked and go out for a run. Che! Everyone despised him. Prove? Do you know who the Tribulation Sword Master is? Chu Yang stood in the rain and looked at the Ling clan's discussion. At this moment, he actually felt that this lively atmosphere was very far away from him. It was so far away that it was like a dream, and he was living in another dream. I really don't want to think of all of you, Chu Yang murmured. Thinking of all of you, I miss all of you too much. What did you think of? Zi Xieching's voice sounded beside him. Chu Yang looked over and saw that Zi Xieching was already standing in the rain in front of him. The rain poured down from the sky. Zi Xieching stood in the rain, and the raindrops seemed to be hitting her body. But only when one was closer would one know that these raindrops didn't hit her body at all. There was not a speck of dust on her body, and she was not wet at all. I thought of something. Chu Yang woke up from his daze and said, Lure is asleep? Yes. I'll let her have a good sleep, Zi Xieching said lightly. This kind of heavy rain, in a sense, is a cleansing by the heavens. Therefore, sleeping at this time is the best for one's spirit. Chu Yang nodded lightly. He thought that Zi Xieching was a 10,000-year-old monster, and had seen a lot. She might be able to tell the reason for the strange scene. He couldn't help but ask, What about you? What did you think of? It was a little late. After being tortured by the angels in white for half the morning and afternoon, he only returned from the hospital after 5 o'clock. Of course, there were some problems, but it was definitely nothing serious. After this chapter is posted, the next chapter will be very late. I want to write a thank you letter for August and post it on the related page. That's free. Brothers, you can all come and take a look. No matter if you're the original author or someone from Tieba, come and take a look. You can also help me increase some clicks. Who knows, your name might be in it. Of course, you can also transfer it away. Yes, I'll say one more thing, asking for guaranteed monthly votes. Of course, the most important thing is that I ask those who like Pride but haven't subscribed to it, please go to the net and increase the number of subscriptions for Pride. One chapter is just a few cents. I'll stretch out my hand and ask for this few cents from everyone. Think about it, brother, you can buy piercing winds all night writing for a few cents. Isn't it worth it? Haha. Actually, my main purpose is to increase the number of subscriptions. Because we, Pride, still want to fight. Because although we, Pride, have no regrets and have a clear conscience, we are still shaken. As long as everyone's subscriptions give me confidence, then, in the near future, we, Pride, will reach the top in one go. Do you want to leave your name in pride's most glorious moment? Do you want to be a brother of pride with me? Come, there are more than 1,000 brothers waiting for you here. Pride's unity, pride's waiting, do you see it? Are you willing to integrate into such a harmonious environment? Chapter 957. Xiexing smiled and said, You don't know? Chu Yang took a breath and said, I'm not sure. Xiexing said lightly, Actually, you've already confirmed it, but you still need me to say it together. She looked up at Chu Yang. Actually, it's really not necessary. You've already confirmed it. Chu Yang looked up. The rain from the sky splashed on his face. He said softly, I miss it so much. Xiexing nodded lightly and didn't ask anything. She just changed the topic and asked, Chu Yang, in your heart, is the woman you love more important? Or is your brother more important? Chu Yang was stunned. How should I evaluate this? Xiexing said lightly. If there's a battle where the woman you love and your brother face certain death at the same time, and you can only save one, which one will you save? Chu Yang said without hesitation. I'll save whichever I see first. What if I see them at the same time? Xiexing pursued. I'll save whoever is closest to me. Chu Yang felt that it was ridiculous. Is there a need to ask such a question? What if I give you time to choose? Xiexing asked. Let you weigh the pros and cons in your heart? Chu Yang frowned. This is purely unreasonable. If I have time to weigh the pros and cons, I'll definitely have time to save both of them. What's the point of weighing the pros and cons? What if there's only one choice? Xiexing asked. To hell with the choice, Chu Yang said rudely. There's no choice. There's no choice. I say, what are you women thinking in your heads? Aren't you tired of thinking about such boring questions every day? Some women ask men every day, between me and your mother, who will you save? It's so boring, Chu Yang said angrily. Xiexing said lightly. Actually, women like to ask such questions to prove their position in men's hearts. Chu Yang laughed mischievously. Forcing a man to make a choice, fuck. Women who force men to make choices should all get lost. This question should be answered like this. You wait patiently until you have a son. When your son's wife asks him this question, then you'll hear the standard answer. Xiexing smiled. Then, are you sure now? Xiexing asked softly. Chu Yang was startled for a moment before he burst into laughter. There were some things in his heart that he was certain of, but he was still half convinced. At this time, he needed the affirmation of others. The affirmation of others could turn your 50% confidence into 10% confidence. However, even if other people's affirmation is correct, you are still influenced by others. You didn't defeat yourself alone. Instead, she was defeated by someone else. Therefore, you only need to say to yourself, my affirmation is your decision. That would do. This was also an inner demon. Moreover, it was an inner demon that everyone had. Regardless of whether they were ordinary people or supreme being experts. Is your father more important or your mother more important? Is your wife more important or your child more important? Is your brother more important or your wife more important? There would never be an answer. If he forced himself to make a choice, it would really cause him to collapse. No one was willing to make such a choice. Xiexing had forced Chu Yang into a dead end with a choice that could not satisfy both sides. Then, at the crucial moment, she had broken through. His words had defeated Chu Yang's inner demons. Chu Yang laughed self-deprecatingly and said, It turns out that my character is still somewhat indecisive. Everyone will hesitate, Xiexing said. It just depends on the speed of the decision. Chu Yang nodded slowly. The two of them stood in the rain for a while and slowly walked back. Unlike before, Chu Yang's heart was full of fire now. Those must be my brothers. Although I have no evidence, but other than them, no one else can give me such a sense of familiarity and intimacy. I'm waiting for you. I'm looking forward to you. Brothers, quickly come up. The heavens are ours. Chu Yang's face was a little red and he moved. Walking into the room, Ling Hanxue and the rest were all stunned. In their eyes, Chu Yang, who was more powerful, was like a drowned rat, while Zi Xieching was actually not wet at all. This was not right. No matter how much Chu Yang protected Zi Xieching, it would not be Chu Yang who was drenched while Zi Xieching was fine. If Chu Yang used his martial arts, it would naturally be possible. But in the current situation, he obviously did not. This discovery made the hearts of Ling Hanwu and the three supreme martial artist elders jump. Including them, all they saw was that Zi Xieching was just an ordinary girl with no cultivation at all. However, the current facts could only prove one thing: they were all wrong. This peerlessly beautiful woman was definitely an unfathomable expert, because they could not see through her cultivation at all. No wonder Chu Yang dared to bring two girls alone and travel tens of thousands of miles. With such a terrifying expert by his side, what was there to be afraid of? Zi Xieching smiled lightly, greeted them and entered her and Chu Le's room. Chu Yang was a little puzzled. He scratched his head. Zi Xieching was obviously doing this on purpose. He had intentionally used such a subtle method to intimidate the Ling family. Why? Chu Yang looked at Ling Hanwu with a scrutinizing gaze. Ling Hanwu also frowned and started to think. His gaze slowly moved and swept past the thin and weak young man at the innermost part of the group. That young man raised his head and lowered it again. His face was pale and he looked a little thin and weak, somewhat pitiful. However, Chu Yang knew that this was definitely caused by his martial arts, and not his weak body. And this young man was also the one with the weakest cultivation in the Ling clan group. He was not even at the emperor level. Ling Hanwu and Ling Hanxue had also never introduced him to Chu Yang. Ling Hanwu frowned and moved his gaze away from his face. Then, he looked at the few martial saint and supreme martial artist experts with a sharp gaze. Under his sharp gaze, three people's expressions changed slightly, and they avoided his gaze. Ling Hanwu snorted heavily and muttered to himself. Bastard! You've embarrassed yourself all the way to the south. Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, Who is this duke? This is my nephew. I brought him here to broaden his horizons. Ling Hanwu said somewhat embarrassedly. Your nephew is really handsome and promising at a young age. Outstanding. Elegant. Talented. Chu Yang said with a smile full of deep meaning. Chu Yang purposely emphasized the word heroic and the word romantic, and dragged out his intonation. Ling Hanwu blushed and said, Young brother is really clever. However, some things will definitely not happen. Chu Yang smiled gently and said, I believe you. Then, he said, It's raining, I'm going to take a nap. Then, he turned and left. The moment he stepped out of the door, that thin and weak young man suddenly raised his head and looked at Chu Yang's back with jealousy in his eyes. Chapter 958. Ling Hanwu watched Chu Yang leave, his eyes full of admiration and seriousness. This young man was definitely not simple. Initially, he had lured him here only because he was the younger brother of his old friend and also the successor of his love rival. Therefore, Ling Hanwu wanted to see what this young man was like. Secondly, it was because he really liked what this young man had done. Especially using his beauty to lure a foppish young master to kill him, it was even more satisfying. Don't you like beauties? I'll let you die because of beauties. To a pervert, this was undoubtedly the most satisfying way to die. But after interacting with him, he realized that this young man was far more terrifying than he had expected. But until today, he realized that he had still greatly underestimated him. What a terrifying person! He was silent for a long time before he said, Schwanger, you like that woman? That young man lowered his head. He didn't speak. Ling Hanwu said, So you want to kill Chu Yang? That young man still didn't speak. Ling Hanwu didn't pay any attention to him. He continued, And you've already made arrangements? You're about to take action? That young man raised his head slightly, and still didn't speak. Ling Hanwu said lightly, I won't interfere with you and I won't stop you. Young men will have to suffer some hardships. Even if these hardships are at the cost of their own lives. You can do as you wish. But if he succeeds, it's his bad luck. If he dies, it's your bad luck. The Ling clan has nothing to do with this. Ling Hanwu stood up and went back to his room. A supreme martial artist considered for a while and followed him out. Second Master, aren't we sending young Master Shuang to his death? The other party is unfathomable and they've taken precautions. And today, they've given us a warning. Once young Master Shuang takes action, they'll definitely not show mercy. Ling Hanwu said coldly. You're right. The other party has already given us a warning. This warning is to give us face. Otherwise, they can take action directly. To him, the friendship between his master and me was something he could kill but didn't kill. Once was more than enough to pay off the debt. So, after this warning, if Shuang'er takes action, he'll definitely die. But as Chu Yang said, all those who covet beauties and want to snatch and kill shouldn't complain when they die. I, Ling Hanwu, am deeply ashamed that our Ling clan has such a person. I only hate that I can't do it myself. If he's courting death, that would be even better. After Ling Hanwu finished speaking coldly, he turned around and entered the room. He only left one sentence. If anyone wants to help him, even if they die, it has nothing to do with the Ling family. Even if Lord Consecrator blames someone, he can only blame me. If anyone wants to seek revenge because of this, they'll have to step over my dead body first. The supreme martial artist was stunned speechless. He sighed and muttered, Young men are full of vigor and vigor. How could Master Shuang not be tempted? Although it's too much to kill Chu Jiang, second master's temper should really be changed. Don't tell me you treat your own family members the same as those perverts outside? In the room. As Chu Yan walked in, steam came out of his body. In a moment his clothes were clean and he felt refreshed. He sat down at the table and said, You want to do it yourself? Xi Xiecheng said coldly. That guy is the god-grandson of some high consecrator, used to inherit the family name. Haha, he actually wanted to use drugs to capture, lure and threaten you. Then, he sent someone to ambush you, kill you and take over me. This plan is really vicious. I didn't expect this guy to be so vicious even though he didn't say anything. That guy was called Du Hanzhuang. He was the god-grandson of Du Macho, the current high consecrator of the Ling clan. He came out this time purely to broaden his horizons. For the sake of martial arts, Du Macho never married. When he was old, he felt that it was difficult to continue the family name. So, he took in a god-grandson and changed his surname to Du. In fact, there were many people who did this in the big clans. Du Hanzhuang had taken a fancy to Xi Xiecheng's beauty. These few days he had been dreaming of her. After hesitating and struggling for a few days, he finally decided to do it. He gathered his confidants and plotted in his room. But what kind of cultivation did Xi Xiecheng have? Even if Xi Xiecheng was dozens of miles away, she would still be able to hear his plot clearly, not to mention right under her nose. Although there was a martial saint-level shield, such a shield was as good as nothing to Xi Xiecheng. Chu Yang smiled amusedly. I see. Ling Hanwu must be feeling very frustrated now. What he hates the most are foppish young masters. But there's actually such a person among the people he brought along. Then, a murderous look appeared in his eyes. He actually used lure? You don't have to care about this. Xi Xiecheng smiled lightly. So, you should sleep tonight. If they take action, it's not suitable for you to take action. That night, Du Hanzhuang thought for a long time and finally decided to take action. A few people had already reminded him that the woman was not simple. However, a young woman, even if she was powerful, how powerful could she be? Rain not getting wet. Even a martial king could do it. Using this as a reason to be powerful, wasn't it ridiculous? Besides, if he couldn't have such a peerless beauty in his life, wouldn't he have wasted his life? The more Du Hanzhuang thought about it, the more his heart burned. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. That night, Chu Yang slept soundly with his head covered. Even if the sky fell, there would be someone to hold it up. What was there for him to worry about? Early morning of the second day. Everyone got up and went out. They didn't find anything unusual. But when the team gathered outside and prepared to set off, they realized that 5 people were missing. Chu Yang, Zi Xieching and Chu Le walked at the front calmly. This time, Chu Le was naturally really calm and composed. Because she didn't know anything. But Chu Yang and Zi Xieching knew what was going on. Ling Hanwu frowned and shouted, "Go and find her!" Du Hanzhuang, 3 martial saints and 1 martial monarch were missing. They disappeared without a trace. Last night, they had been listening attentively. They heard Du Hanzhuang giving orders in a low voice, and even the sound of his hand gestures. Then, the sound of 5 people moving out. Then, there was no then. Because everything had suddenly disappeared. This kind of situation caused everyone to be greatly shocked. Someone went to those few rooms to search again, but still didn't find anything. They checked far and near, but still didn't find anything. Ling Hanwu listened to the report, and his pupils shrank. He looked at Chu Yang and Zi Xieching silently, and didn't say anything. There was disappointment, joy, and disappointment in his eyes. But a supreme martial artist of the Ling clan felt a little uncomfortable. Along the way, he walked to Zi Xieching and said lightly, "Miss Zi, good trick. May I ask, how did Miss Zi do it?" Zi Xieching raised her eyes coldly and looked at him. "So all of you are clear about it." This supreme martial artist was stunned and a little speechless. He obviously knew, but he allowed his brother to kidnap a civilian girl. This was something that couldn't be justified. Although the other party wasn't a civilian girl, he swallowed his saliva and said, "Please enlighten me, Miss Zi." Zi Xieching said coldly, "Actually, I know all of you know, but I thought all of you would pretend to be deaf and dumb. Originally, I was very satisfied with your Ling clan so far. But you really shouldn't keep silent." This supreme martial artist said lightly, "It's a pity that even if our brother made a mistake, he should teach himself a lesson. As for others, they taught our unfilial brother a lesson, but they should also give us an explanation." Zi Xieching's eyebrows frowned dangerously, and she said lightly, "Is that so?" "Exactly. Miss Zi, you killed people. Don't tell me you don't even give us an explanation?" This supreme martial artist asked tit for tat. "I thought your Ling clan would give me an explanation," Zi Xieching said with some surprise. "I didn't expect you to come here to ask me for an explanation. If I'm just a weak girl, then who should I ask for an explanation now?" This supreme martial artist said lightly, "Unfortunately, Miss Zi, you're not a weak girl." Zi Xieching nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll give you an explanation. This explanation is, they deserve to die." The anger on this supreme martial artist's face became more and more intense. He said, "Even if they deserve to die, you shouldn't be the one to kill them." Zi Xieching laughed softly. "Outsiders shouldn't be the one to kill them, but you don't know how to do it yourself. Is this what you mean? Now that I've killed them, what are you going to do?" This supreme martial artist said angrily, "You've killed people, so you should at least leave their corpses behind. Don't forget, the people in front of you are from the Ling clan." "Corpses?" Zi Xieching said sarcastically. "Don't tell me you still want to wear mourning clothes and be a filial grandson?" She paused and said, "So what if you're from the Ling clan?" This supreme martial artist's face turned red. "Miss Zi, you've gone too far," Zi Xieching said impatiently. "Am I the one who's gone too far, or is it your Ling clan? You snatched a girl first, and now you're denouncing me. Am I the one who's gone too far? This is the martial world." This supreme martial artist said gloomily, "Miss Zi, with your cultivation, you should know that even if you want to be chivalrous, you also need capital and strength. You've gone too far. Since that's the case, I don't mind going too far for once," Zi Xieching said lightly. "Just now, you said that the Ling clan can only be punished by yourselves. I wonder if it's okay for me to punish you." This supreme martial artist stared at her for a while, and suddenly laughed. "Miss Zi, do you want to verify with me? I welcome you with open arms." "That's exactly what I want." Zi Xieching shook her head lightly. No, I just want to punish you. Suddenly, she raised her hand and gave a slap. This supreme martial artist clearly saw that fair little hand coming towards him. He also wanted to block it, and also wanted to shake his head and dodge it. However, even though he thought of everything, he still couldn't dodge it. The speed was so slow, and he actually didn't dodge it. Smack! There was a loud and clear sound. This supreme martial artist's body was sent flying out from the horse like a rocket. He flailed his arms and legs in the air, somersaulting and tumbling all the way out from more than 1,000 feet. Zhixiaqing didn't move an inch on the horse, her eyes cold. The other two supreme martial artists, and Ling Hanwu, were shocked and turned to look. The few of them had heard the conversation between the two just now. Ling Hanwu wanted to stop them, but in the blink of an eye, a supreme martial artist was actually sent flying. He didn't have the strength to fight back. The other two supreme martial artists snorted, their eyes full of anger. In a flash, they were about to make a move. You clearly know who's right and who's wrong, yet you still want to make a move? Zhixiaqing asked lightly. At this moment, that supreme martial artist who was sent flying also flew back with a swoosh. He was panting heavily, his eyes full of anger. Half of his face was already swollen. Chu Yang looked on coldly from the side, not stopping them. In the morning, Zhixiaqing had once said to him, Ling Hanwu and your teacher are good friends, but there are too few such people in the aristocratic families. Don't think that everyone in the Ling clan is good just because you're good friends with Ling Hanwu. Today, I'll show you the true nature of aristocratic families. At that time, Chu Yang still didn't think much of it. Because since Ling Hanwu allowed them to die last night, it meant that he thought that they only had themselves to blame, and wouldn't do anything wrong today. He didn't expect that the conflict had already started while the words were still in his ears. Chu Yang looked on silently. Looking at the three supreme martial artists, and a few martial saints surrounding Zhixiaqing, the bitterness in his heart also slowly expanded. Aristocratic families were indeed aristocratic families. Even though these people knew what was right and wrong, they were all righteous. Every one of them was a righteous person, but when it came to their own people, they were more protective of their own people. Even if you helped their clan to get rid of the malignant tumor, you've also damaged their clan's authority. Therefore, there had to be an explanation. And the explanation now was for the clan's reputation. Under this premise, there was no reason to talk about it. Right was wrong was wrong. What do you say? Chu Yang asked Ling Hanwu, who came to his side quietly. There was bitterness on Ling Hanwu's face. He said, This is what aristocratic families are like. And what I dislike the most. He let out a long sigh and said, The current aristocratic families have already changed. They've already become forces. Chu Yang frowned. Aristocratic families' forces? Ling Hanwu shook his head bitterly. The so-called righteousness and the rules of the martial world are just justice under the strong. Chu Yang, let them fight it out. Just don't kill anyone. Chu Yang grunted and said lightly, Uncle, if the Ling clan does something wrong and offends a strong enemy, then you're right. You know that the Ling clan is in the wrong. Will you also participate in the war? Ling Hanwu smiled bitterly and said, I don't know. Chu Yang nodded. I understand. He pondered for a while and said slowly, So, this is what aristocratic families are like. He let out a long sigh and said, Aristocratic families are ultimately not as good as the country. He remembered that although there were continuous battles in the lower three heavens, there weren't many experts. But there were officials and legal systems. So, it looked much more orderly than the lower three heavens and the upper three heavens. But in the upper three heavens, it made people very uncomfortable. So, this was why. Aristocratic families were always protective of their own people. Even if their own people were unpardonably evil, they still had to give an explanation if others killed them. And they would never suffer in silence. Even if there was someone like Ling Hanwu, it couldn't change the nature of aristocratic families. Or rather, even if Ling Hanwu became the clan master of the Ling clan, it couldn't change. If the Tribulation Sword Master reorganized the heavens, and such a big aristocratic family was replaced by another big aristocratic family, wouldn't it be the same as changing the soup but not the medicine? Chu Yang pondered in his heart. What should I do in the future? Xi Xiecheng let out a shrill cry. The battle had begun. Chapter 959. Chu Yang didn't turn back. He didn't care about the battle situation at all. He said indifferently, "You don't know means. If something like this happens in the future, you'll still stand on the side of the clan and fight for no reason? For the sake of the Ling clan, you'll give up your beliefs?" Ling Hanwu smiled bitterly and said, "You must force me to make a choice and tell me the answer, right?" Chu Yang nodded. Ling Hanwu took a deep breath. "The clan gave birth to me and raised me until I'm this old. If the clan is right, the clan is right, I'll naturally fight for the clan with all my might. But if the clan is wrong, if the clan is wrong," Ling Hanwu said word by word, "I'll go to the enemy myself to ask for forgiveness and resolve the grudges. If the grudges can't be resolved, I'll choose to leave far away, leave my clan." He lowered his head sadly. "For this, I've already left once. But you've still come back in the end," Chu Yang said indifferently. "So you swore to kill all the fops in the world and kill all the people who force women. But there are people around you and in your clan, but you don't kill them. You want to kill them, but you won't do it yourself. So you use others to do your dirty work and let us kill him. But after we kill him, there's a contradiction. That's the situation now. And in such a situation, you propose to let them fight. To resolve the grudges through battle." Chu Yang commented accurately. "So you're a righteous person, but you don't have a bottom line. I can only say this, you're a righteous fence-sitter." A righteous fence-sitter. This sentence seemed very funny, but after Ling Hanwu heard it, his heart shook. He murmured, "No matter righteous or noble, a fence-sitter will always be a fence-sitter." Chu Yang snorted and said, "So Yi Chuqin doesn't like you, but my teacher. Because on this point, you're far inferior to my teacher. No matter what kind of setbacks my teacher has faced, he hasn't changed. But you're changing all the time. Although your infatuation hasn't changed, your standpoint has changed countless times." Ling Hanwu's expression was bitter. He murmured, "Do you know, the reason why I gave up back then was because I'm not as good as your teacher." "So, you're much more pitiful than my teacher," Chu Yang said with some pity. Ling Hanwu let out a long sigh. "Oh, you don't seem to be worried about this battle at all," Ling Hanwu said. "There's no use worrying." Chu Yang laughed and said, "If I'm worried about little Z's victory, then I've already started worrying." Chu Yang's strength. Now, even Chu Yang didn't dare to believe in this infatuated and pitiful Ling Hanwu. Trump card. After all, Hanwu. Ling Ti Chu Yang want ts worry. To worry. The only thing I need to worry about is whether or not this big sister will slaughter the Ling family in a fit of rage. In the arena, Xi Xiecheng's white robe fluttered in the wind. Her long sleeves fluttered in the wind, making her look like an immortal. The three clan of theirs saw the energy that leaked out was tightly sealed by Xi Xiecheng. To testes. With Xi Xiecheng's cultivation, she could easily get rid of the three of them. But she dragged it out and did not finish it. Because one of the supreme martial artists of the Ling clan had actually entered the Dao realm under Xi Xiecheng's immense pressure during the intense battle. And the supreme martial artist Tao state's power was purer than Chu Yang's. Because this was a true Dao state that was born from the moment of life and death. Xi Xiecheng was excited. How could she let it go? Her hands kept making mysterious gestures, collecting all the Tao state's power. She didn't even leave behind a little bit of the comprehension that this supreme martial artist needed. In other words, even if this supreme martial artist knew that he had entered the Tao state, he wouldn't get any benefits. The battle continued. Xi Xiecheng was calm, but the two supreme martial artists of the Ling clan were anxious. They launched a strong attack at the same time. Once they moved, the supreme martial artist who was in the Tao state also woke up. They attacked at the same time. Xi Xiecheng was furious. I've finally collected some Tao State's power, but you've spoiled it. Enraged, Xiao Chen's figure moved like lightning. A white shadow swept past with a schwa sound. Bang, bang, bang. The three supreme martial artists staggered backward. Step by step, they retreated more than 10 steps. Then, their faces turned pale and they spat out a mouthful of blood. Zi Xiecheng waved her two white sleeves towards the sky. The power gathered during this battle was thrown out at the same time. It was like throwing out a bomb. After a long time, there was a boom in the sky. A black hole suddenly appeared in the sky and disappeared. Zi Xiecheng stood with her hands behind her back. She said lightly, "Don't look for me for an explanation, and don't look for me for justice. Otherwise, I'll look for your entire clan to talk about what justice is. I'll let your clan know what justice is." The three supreme martial artists were scared out of their wits. They didn't dare to take a step forward. The three of them felt that with this woman's strength, it would be easier for her to kill the three of them. "There's no justice for you in front of me," Zi Xiecheng said lightly. "I'm not killing you this time because I'm repaying Chu Yang's master a favor. If your high priest is unhappy and wants justice, I'll wait here. Let him come." Chu Lur watched from the side. She couldn't help but be moved. Her eyes lit up, and she almost clapped her hands and cheered. Too powerful, too domineering. As a woman, she should be like this. After going through such a thing, it was naturally inconvenient for both parties to walk together. Chu Yang and Ling Hanwu smiled bitterly at each other, and went their separate ways. Of course, everyone had the same goal. It was just that there was a sequence. Chu Yang and Zi Xiecheng walked in front, while Ling Hanwu and the rest walked behind. This atmosphere was the most awkward. Fortunately, they met more and more people along the way. When they reached the last fork, there was an endless stream of people from all walks of life. Right in front of them was a straight road. It was at least 1,000 feet wide. At the far end was a huge city. At the intersection, there were hundreds of men in green standing in an orderly manner. Once a pharmacist came and verified his identity, someone would arrange for a man in green to lead him into the city and into the designated resting area. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Pharmacists from all walks of life swarmed in, but the intersection didn't seem crowded at all. That was because those people in green immediately rushed back after leading the pharmacists in. When Chu Yang arrived, a man in green in his 40s immediately came up to him. "Are you here to participate in the medicine banquet?" Chu Yang smiled and said, "Yes." The man in green said respectfully, "May I know your surname? Please identify yourself." "My surname is Chu," Chu Yang said lightly. He reached out and took out the jade token that Han Xiaoran had prepared for him and handed it over. That man took it and looked at it. He was instantly filled with respect. "So it's the chief physician of the Southeast Law Enforcement Hall. Please forgive me for not coming out to welcome you." As he said, he sized up Chu Yang carefully. Then, he waved his hand and called over a man in green. He said, "Send Chu Yang to the Orchard Palace to rest." That man in green lowered his head and replied, "Yes." He stood beside Chu Yang and said respectfully, "Chu Yang, please follow me." Chu Yang smiled and said, "Thank you." Then, he followed behind him and walked in. But he was a little confused. He thought to himself, "I heard from afar that the accommodations arranged for me were so-and-so inn, so-and-so restaurant, or so-and-so residence. But the accommodations arranged for me were the Orchard Palace. Before this, there didn't seem to be anyone who would enter a residence with the name so-and-so garden. Could it be that the physicians of the law enforcement officers were treated with special courtesy?" After walking for more than 10 miles, Chu Yang suddenly stopped. In front of him was a big city. On the city wall, 3 big words came into his sight. "Tianji City!" Chu Yang looked at these 3 words and couldn't help but think of Mo Tianji. He thought to himself, if Mo Tianji were to live in this city and become the city lord, he would really live up to his name. "Chu Yang, our Zhuge clan's Tianji City has always been famous in the world. I believe Chu Yang will definitely not be disappointed if you live in it." The man in green who led the way said. Yes, what a domineering name, Chu Yang praised. The Zhuge clan is indeed an intelligent clan. Even its name has the word Tianji. It's really the master of calculation and manipulation who can control Tianji. That's right. The Zhuge clan has always been known as the divulgators of Tianji. The man in green laughed and said very proudly, in our Zhuge clan, there is no Tianji that cannot be understood. Chu Yang smiled lightly and said, looks like I have to do a divination after I go in. He said softly, a divination of good and bad fortune. The man in green laughed and said, if Chu Yang wants to do a divination, you've really come to the right place in our Zhuge clan's Tianji city. In the city, there's almost one fortune teller in every 3 to 5 steps. And most of them are quite capable. Chu Yang laughed loudly. So he entered slowly. Along the way, he saw that there were indeed fortune-telling stalls everywhere. And there were also many fortune-telling stalls in the shops on both sides of the city. The stall owners were all dressed in feathered clothes and tall crowns. They were lean and had an otherworldly appearance. Damn it, no wonder this is Diwu Qingrou's base camp. Everyone here looks very sinister. Chu Yang muttered in his heart. In his dantian, the sword spirit, who had been in seclusion to recover his spirit, suddenly appeared and said, where have we come to? Why does it feel so familiar? This is Tianji City. Chu Yang said mentally. Zi Xieching, who was at the side, looked at him lightly and didn't say anything. So it's here. The sword spirit was obviously excited and said, in Tianji City, there's a piece of my sword intent here. As long as you keep it, I'll use the sword intent to help you. You'll be able to gather the 7 shades cold energy, the evil dragon dagger's cold energy, and the cold energy from the mysterious Yin spring and turn them into your own power. And you can also absorb the essence of the heavens and earth that you obtained from the poisonous flood dragon. Chu Yang was delighted. Really? 2 things. First, Yishiyu came to find me today and asked me to clear his name. He said that ever since I wrote about him, his name has been ruined by me. Here, I'll make it clear, I'm very familiar with Yishiyu. At that time, I saw that she was very beautiful, so I kissed her and touched her. In the end, I took off her clothes and looked at her. That's all. Until now, I've been using eye drops, washing my hands and brushing my teeth. In summary, I've come to the conclusion, Yishiyu is definitely a ladyboy. Second, I'll recommend a book Charging Sword by a friend. Introduction: a sword fanatic who loves swords more than his life. His greatest misfortune is that he's in a low-level martial world where ancient martial arts are declining and sword arts are declining. He's unable to pursue the limits of sword arts. The greatest misfortune of a disciple from a big clan is that he's in a high-level sword arts world. He has no choice but to embark on the path of sword cultivation. However, his aptitude is low and it's difficult for him to achieve anything. Coincidentally, the soul of such a sword fanatic transmigrated through time and space and came to a different world where sword arts were dominating. His soul and memories merged with the soul of such a disciple. Thus, a sword arts genius was born in this world. There are 3,000 great Daos, but only my sword arts. My sword arts are unstoppable. Chapter 960. The sword spirit said with displeasure. Why would I lie to you? Chu Yang said happily. That's great. Recently, I've always felt that I'm not strong enough. Not strong enough? The sword spirit sized him up and suddenly frowned. Your current cultivation is. How did you reach the 7th stage of Sovereign Emperor? Grade! Chu Yang corrected him. 7th stage! The sword spirit said angrily. How can I be wrong? You have so much Tao state energy in your body and you've already broken through the 7th stage. You're still dreaming. How can that kind of breakthrough be compared to the breakthrough of Tao state? You seem a little unhappy that I've broken through? Chu Yang asked. It's not that I'm unhappy, but I'm a little puzzled. The sword spirit murmured. Logically speaking, you only have 4 tribulation swords now. You shouldn't have broken through to the 7th stage of Sword Sovereign. Chu Yang was speechless. Huh! The sword spirit murmured. At this speed, won't you become a supreme martial artist with the seventh fragment? How can the previous masters of the tribulation's sword be so fast? Chu Yang was surprised. Huh! The sword spirit didn't say anything. Chu Yang was suspicious. Could it be that the previous masters of the tribulation's sword could only become a supreme martial artist and pacify the heavens after gathering all the tribulations? But since the sword spirit didn't say anything, Chu Yang naturally didn't ask. However, along the way, they discovered a strange phenomenon. There was a clear difference between the people on this street. On both sides of the street, there were ordinary businessmen, people from other places and people from the Zhuge clan. The three groups of people didn't fit in. Even people who came here for the first time could tell at a glance who was from the Zhuge clan, who was a local businessman or ordinary martial artist, and who was from other places. It was as if there was a label hanging in front of their chests. But it was purely based on their temperament. Duke Chu must have seen it too. The warrior who led the way smiled and said, Those who seem to be confident and indifferent are all from the Zhuge clan. Moreover, the Zhuge clan is known as the divulgators of heaven's secrets. They have their own ways to protect themselves. Therefore, although people with high cultivation can see the cultivation of others, they can't see the cultivation of the Zhuge clan's people. Chu Yang nodded approvingly. This must be the Zhuge clan's concealing one's strength and biding one's time technique. You are indeed experienced and knowledgeable. The warrior in green chuckled. That's why there's the least conflict here. It's also the most peaceful place, said the azure-robed warrior with a smile. Yes, there will be more conflicts soon. Chu Yang nodded lightly. The warrior in green choked and said, You must be joking. Along the way, Chu Yang discovered that there were many people who had the unique medicinal fragrance of the pharmacists on their bodies. They entered inns one after another, or came out of inns one after another, and strolled on the streets. However, he hadn't arrived at his residence yet. It was clearly not in this area. He couldn't help but ask, Where exactly is the Orchard Palace? How far is it? The warrior in green said, It's just in front. We'll reach it after 2 more turns. Although he said that they were almost there, Chu Yang actually followed him for a full hour before he saw the Orchard Palace. It was actually in the heart of the city, a huge mansion that occupied a large area. It was an extremely exquisite residence with richly ornamented beams and painted rafters. There were blooming orchids everywhere, and the fragrance of orchids assailed their nostrils. Although it was in the heart of the city, it was rather quiet here. There was a different kind of elegant feeling of I'm the only one sober when the world is drunk, a great hermit in the city. The azure-robed warrior went forward to report. The door of the Orchard Palace opened with a creak. 2 young men came out respectfully and led Chu Yang in. The azure-robed warrior then took his leave. Chu Yang, Zi Xieching and Chu Lur entered the Orchard Palace. They saw orchids swaying and blooming everywhere. In the entire courtyard, other than orchids, there was no other greenery. The orchids were quite lush. Every place where the orchids grew was ingeniously covered with rockery or strange stones, forming a winding but elegant and quiet path. There was a shallow stream that was only a few feet wide, flowing through the orchids. The stream was filled with pebbles of various colors. Under the sunlight, the shallow stream seemed to emit a brilliant brilliance, as if all the stars in the sky were gathered in the stream. As they walked forward quietly, a small pond appeared in front of them. The pond water was dark green, and a few orchids floated on the water's surface, budding. At this point, there were finally other flowers and trees. Along the way, sparse shadows swayed and the path was filled with shade. The sparse shadows were slanted, the water was clear and shallow, and a subtle fragrance floated in the evening. After a few more turns, they saw a few exquisite and elegant houses. Once they saw this place, Zi Xieching and Chu Lu were very satisfied with the environment here. Both of them had comfortable smiles on their faces. The person who led them here bowed and left after leading them here. Then, a few young girls came out of the house and bowed to welcome them. In this environment, it seemed that these few maids had also become the elves of the orchids, elegant and quiet. Chu Yang stepped forward and was about to push the door open. Suddenly he sniffed, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. It was still the orchid fragrance, but this orchid fragrance was a little different. Chu Yang waved his hand and said, "All of you can leave. You don't need to serve here, just prepare the 3 meals and tea a day." "Yes." The 4 maids agreed at the same time and quietly left. Chu Yang stood in front of the door and looked at it, a deep smile on his face. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Xi Xiecheng asked. "Is there a problem?" "There's a big problem." Chu Yang smiled gently and said lightly, "He knows that I'm here." "Who?" Xi Xiecheng asked. "Diwu Qingru," Chu Yang said quietly, his eyes revealing a look of reminiscence. At this moment, his heart suddenly rose and fell, and he was filled with emotions. The distant past of the lower 3 heavens suddenly surged into his mind. The strategizing, the deciding of victory from 1,000 miles away, the killing, the battle of wits, in the snowy sky, he and a few brothers braved the wind and snow to rush to Great Xiao, and plotted against Wu Prefecture. Later on, he sneaked into the Prime Minister's residence at night, and from then on, he fled for thousands of miles, hunted down at every step, and died at every step. "I'll never forget this fragrance in my life," Chu Yang sighed and said. "That was the time in my life when I was closest to death." Chu Yang took a breath of this special orchid fragrance, and seemed to feel that his heart and lungs were about to emit the fragrance of orchids again. Fragrance for thousands of miles, orchid heart-chasing soul. This was what Diwu Qingru had done to him back then. Diwu Qingru had only done it once in his life, and that was to him. That time, he only used 1 palm, and that was fragrance for thousands of miles, orchid heart-chasing soul. Now, the fragrance coming from the door of this elegant house was exactly that kind of fragrance. Although the fragrance coming from the orchid heart-chasing soul palm was almost the same as the fragrance of orchids, ordinary people would definitely not be able to tell the difference. But Chu Yang had been struggling with this fragrance for a few days back then. How could he not smell it? It was practically engraved in his heart and bones, and he would never forget it. Just now, he could smell it even before he got close. This was definitely Diwu Qingru's fragrance for thousands of miles, orchid heart-chasing soul. But why would the smell of Diwu Qingru's unique martial art appear here? Xi Xiecheng frowned and said, "Is there a problem with this door?" Then, she sniffed and said, "So it's this fragrance that's the problem." "Yes. This is Diwu Qingru's unique martial art," Chu Yang said lightly. "It's already a little out of line for us to be arranged here, and here, Diwu Qingru's unique martial art has appeared." Xi Xiecheng said. Diwu Qingru is telling me, I know, you're already here." Chu Yang smiled lightly and said, "Diwu Qingru is still considerate." Xi Xiecheng gave a light hum. She didn't think much of these tricks, so she didn't consider it. "Diwu Qingru also told me that it's inconvenient for him to move now." Chu Yang looked at the 2 doors and said, "So he can only use this method. Otherwise, the one standing here now would be him. Furthermore, he also told me to be careful. Otherwise, I would have to worry about my soul being chased like that day." Chu Yang frowned and said, "He also told me that the person who wants to deal with me is from the Diwu clan. Because this is the unique martial art of the Diwu clan. Since it's from the Diwu clan, and I didn't offend the Diwu clan, but I killed a relative of someone from the Diwu clan, it must be this person." Chu Yang said heavily. "If I remember correctly, this person is called Diwu Qingyun. The Sun clan is his in-laws. So, this Diwu Qingyun is here for revenge. You can think of so many things just from such a small fragrance?" Xi Xiecheng was a little surprised. This kind of brain is too unimaginable, isn't it? Isn't it just a fragrance that's different from ordinary orchids? He can actually make it sound so magical. "It's not just that." Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, "This fragrance is life-taking. Then, not only my life may be taken away, if possible, I also want to take the life of this person who did it. This is Diwu Qingru's hint and request to me. He's hinting to me that if possible, I should help him clean up his family. At the same time, he's also telling me that the Sun Clan's matter has nothing to do with the Wuqing, and that I can rest assured. Chu Yang closed his eyes and thought for a while. Then, he took a breath and said, I can only think of so much for now. Xi Xiecheng almost clicked her tongue and said, It's already incredible that you can deduce this possibility just from a small fragrance. But from your tone, it seems that you've missed something? When dealing with the Wuqing, not to mention missing something, even if it's just a little bit, it'll be beyond redemption. Chu Yang said deeply. The Wuqing has always looked down on martial arts. He only needs to use his wisdom to be invincible at any time. Xi Xiecheng curled her lips and disagreed. She didn't believe that with her godly skills, there wouldn't be anyone who could be her match in the entire heavens. What ability does this the Wuqing have to be invincible in front of me? I remember now. Chu Yang was enlightened. This 1,000 miles of fragrance, orchid heart-chasing soul, is a poison technique. And it can only be effective when it's hit on a person's body and after it's mixed with the heart and lungs. So, this the Wuqing used poison to deal with me. And it's a mixed poison. I need to apologize to everyone today. There are 2 things that I've done wrong. First, I've read through the August update and realized that there are a few chapters that are simply too horrible to look at. And some of the logic is messed up. When I have time, I'll edit them one by one. I'm sorry, brothers. It's really disappointing to spend money to read chapters that aren't of high quality. Second, it's a big mistake. This mistake made me speechless. Everyone should remember that when I was crazy, there was once when I suddenly stopped on the 2nd day after the outbreak. The problem appeared there. A big mistake. I'm thinking of a way to make up for it. There's a person who shouldn't have appeared here. But I wrote it smoothly and wrote it in very quickly. And after I wrote it, I continued to write. Although I felt that something was wrong, I didn't realize it at that time. And from then on, my train of thought was stuck. Even if it was a satisfying plot, it wasn't satisfying at all. Until today, when I looked at my own plot, the more I looked at it, the more I felt that something was wrong. I hurriedly looked for an outline to compare with. Only then did I realize, what the heck? Why did this guy appear here? It's really a headache. This matter is really... I've been writing too much for the past few days. The person who shouldn't have appeared, but the person who should have appeared was nowhere to be found. Cough, cough. I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. I can only say, sorry, this is really a mistake that shouldn't have happened. But I'll make up for it. And I've already thought of a way. I believe everyone won't be disappointed. It's a blessing in disguise, haha. Chapter 961. Xi Xiecheng frowned slightly and asked suspiciously, Is it? Chu Yang nodded affirmatively. Definitely. Xi Xiecheng frowned again. Why did Du Wuqing remind you? Aren't you his enemy? Chu Yang said affirmatively. Yes, we are definitely not friends. Xi Xiecheng was puzzled. If so, why did he remind you? Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief and said, Sometimes, an enemy is much more reliable than a so-called friend. He smiled calmly. Actually, sometimes, only an enemy can help you without anyone noticing. But this time, Du Wuqing is not helping me. For example, Du Wuqing. Chu Yang said lightly. Du Wuqing is still using the same method, to kill with a borrowed knife. And you can't refuse to lend him the knife. Even if you want to turn against him and sow discord, no one will believe you. So you can only lend him the knife. This is where he is smart. Xi Xiecheng pondered for a while and said, I understand what you mean. You're saying that he wanted to kill this person long ago, but he couldn't because they are from the same clan. Now that you're here and have a grudge against him, he will definitely take revenge. But you naturally won't let him go, especially in the Zhuge clan, where they are at home ground. Keeping such a person alive is equivalent to asking for trouble. So you can only kill him according to Du Wuqing's wishes. You won't gain anything by killing him. On the contrary, your enemy, Du Wuqing, will gain. Xi Xiecheng finally straightened things out. You're absolutely right, Chu Jiang said sullenly. Only Di Wuqingru can do such a thing that I can't fight back at all. I even suspect that the method this person used to kill me was also Di Wuqingru's idea. He was the one who came up with the plan behind the scenes. He paused for a while and said, It must be. Otherwise, there wouldn't be this 1,000 miles of fragrance chasing soul. Chu Yang sighed. It's really frustrating. I've just arrived at the Zhuge clan and I'm faced with a head-on blow. And I can't fight back. It's indeed frustrating, haha. Xi Xiecheng thought for a long time before she understood the twists and turns in this. She actually laughed. Counting with her fingers, she said, He came to kill you, you have to kill him. Now that we're on their home ground, we can't leave any loose ends. That's right. Chu Yang's face darkened. Second, even if you want to use this matter to drag Di Wuqingru into the water, you can't do it. That's because you'll have to explain how you know Di Wuqingru, and how you came to the upper three heavens. That would expose your true identity. That's right. Chu Yang's face darkened. So you can only listen to Di Wuqingru's plan and be his hired thug. Xi Xiecheng could not help but laugh. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's right. Chu Yang's face darkened. What if we blow this matter up and let the Zhuge clan deal with it? Xi Xiecheng asked. No, Chu Jiang said. Zhuge clan will definitely shield you and not punish you severely if you make a big fuss. No matter what, we can't take his life. If that's the case, the whole Zhuge clan will know about the feud between us, and he'll be even more unscrupulous. And under such circumstances, with countless people watching, I'll be restrained instead. Secondly, if this matter blows up, even if I kill him, there'll be no hope for us to achieve the purpose of coming to the medicine banquet this time. Chu Jiang said sullenly. Before Di Wuqingru took action, he had already taken all these into consideration. So when he made his move, the result was already predetermined. As long as he makes a move, I can only follow his arrangements. There's no other way. There's no loophole for me to counterattack. If that's the case, this Di Wuqingru's wisdom is really extraordinary. Xi Xiecheng said slowly. He's a person who almost single-handedly came from nothing to control the world and almost unified the whole lower three heavens. And he didn't even use his martial arts? Chu Yang sighed. It's a pity that he was still defeated by you in the end, Xi Xiecheng said. I'm different from him. I have secrets. How can I be the same as him? But he did indeed come from nothing and became an imperial minister with his bare hands. And even in the final victory, Di Wuqingru had the intention to go easy on him. Otherwise, that battle would have lasted for 3 to 5 years. Chu Jiang said. Di Wuqingru's wisdom is definitely the sharpest weapon in the lower three heavens. It's a pity that my brother isn't here. Speaking till here, Chu Yang sighed. He thought of Mo Tianji and thought, if Mo Tianji was in such a situation, how would he deal with Di Wuqingru's schemes? Mo Tianji had a card up his sleeve as he thought about it. He was calm and unhurried no matter what happened. Suddenly, Chu Yang's eyes lit up. Xi Xiecheng asked sensitively, What's wrong? Chu Yang snorted and said, This time, I'll let Di Wuqingru suffer a big loss first. Di Wuqingru must be killed, but I can't listen to Di Wuqingru's arrangements. Xi Xiecheng nodded in appreciation and said, That's right. In a battle between wise men, as long as you're led by the nose by the opponent for the first time, you'll always be led by the nose by the opponent in the future. It'll be a huge blow to your confidence. Chu Yang sighed and said, Isn't that the case? Didn't Tai Longqing of the lower three heavens fall into Di Wuqingru's schemes right from the start, and not be able to turn the situation around for 17 or 18 years? Sigh. He thought. I can't repeat Tai Longqing's mistakes and be implanted with an inner demon by Di Wuqingru. Otherwise, I'll really be ruined. Chu Yang entered the room and first looked around. He already knew what to do, so naturally, he easily found the dried medicine that was smeared on the walls of the bed, the door, the table, and chairs. Finding a piece of cloth, Chu Yang started to clean the room. He wiped it all over the place. After rinsing the room several times, he finally cleaned it up. He took out the bedding and placed it under the sunlight. Then, he used the heaven-splitting divine technique to pat it. Not to mention the powder on it, even if it was a formless poison, it would definitely be smacked away. In the blink of an eye, it was already time to eat. The sound of footsteps came from the door. Chu Yang looked up and saw a green-clothed man walking over with a few servants carrying food boxes. Chu Yang greeted him with a smile. That man's figure was a little stooped, but he didn't look old. He had 3 strands of black beard on his chin, black hair, long eyebrows and phoenix eyes. He was actually quite good-looking. Moreover, it seemed that he was somewhat similar to Diwu Qingru. As for his stooped waist, it should be because he had been receiving and sending people off for many years. Is this Dr. Chu from the southeast? Nian Relang smiled and cupped his hands. He said heartily, Dr. Chu is the special envoy of law enforcement Master Han. Shuga clan didn't go out to welcome you. We apologize to Dr. Chu here. His smile was cordial and his expression was sincere. His attitude was respectful and neither servile nor overbearing. It was just right. It was the standard diplomatic face of a teacher. Chu Yang greeted him cordially, but scolded in his heart, he's indeed a descendant of the Diwu clan. Such an unimportant person is actually so sinister. However, he laughed out loud and said, You're too polite! You're too polite! Ha! May I know your name? What's your position in the Juga clan? The man in green smiled cordially and said, I'm the attendant of welcoming guests of the Juga clan. My lowly name isn't worth mentioning. Chu Yang held his hand cordially and winked mysteriously. He whispered in his ear, You're Lord Diwu Qingyun, right? Ha, I know it's you. Diwu Qingyun was instantly startled. What's going on? Why does this irreconcilable enemy look at me as if I'm an old friend who hasn't seen me for a long time? He stuttered. Dr. Chu. Chu! This? Chu Yang sighed and patted Diwu Qingyun's shoulder. He said painfully, To be honest, regarding the Sun clan, I'm very sorry. I really didn't know about it beforehand. Diwu Qingyun was even more startled. He's even clearer than me? What's going on? He laughed dryly. He really had nothing to say. He wanted to get angry, but he couldn't. Moreover, his identity was exposed, and he felt a little guilty. He said, Dr. Chu is really direct, right? Chu Yang smiled cordially and said, But to be honest, Lord Diwu, the reason why I'm being honest with you is really, the level of your mixed poison is a little too low. Of course, I'm not looking down on you, but Chu Yang smiled meaningfully. Diwu Qingyun's face turned a little ugly. He said, I don't understand what Dr. Chu is saying. The smile on Chu Yang's face slowly disappeared, and his gaze turned from gentle to fierce. This kind of slow change made people feel the most pressured. Cold sweat couldn't help but appear on Diwu Qingyun's face. His breathing became heavy, and his legs trembled a little. He didn't forget that the person in front of him was a sword emperor. An absolute killing god who killed without batting an eyelid. Chu Yang said coldly and indifferently, Lord Diwu, the reason why I'm talking to you nicely is because I don't want the Zhuge clan to face the law enforcement officers of the southeast region. Do you understand what I mean? Actually, if I want to kill you, I can totally wait for you to take action, and then kill you legitimately. Do you understand? Diwu Qingyun finally retreated in defeat. He said with a trembling voice. But you! Why? Chu Yang said indifferently. Lord Qingru and law enforcement Master Han are old friends. He doesn't want me to kill you, so he asked me to be merciful to you. Diwu Qingyun's face turned sallow instantly. He opened his eyes wide and said in disbelief, Diwu Qingru? Chu Yang patted Diwu Qingru's shoulder to comfort him. He then rejoiced and said, I didn't disappoint Sir Diwu Qingru's trust. In fact, this matter is just a misunderstanding. Moreover, those people only have themselves to blame. Diwuqingyun took 2 steps back. Diwuqingru? How come? Chu Yang said indifferently. He's doing it for your own good. Even though I've been poisoned by you, it's easy for me to kill you if I want to. It would be better if he didn't say this. The more he said this, the heavier Diwuqingyun's breathing became. He muttered, For my own good. For my own good. I'll report a few things to my relatives. During this period of time, I've booked a full set at the hospital, and I'll go there at 8:30 a.m. sharp. Then I'll massage, electrotherapy and acupuncture, and finally I'll roast. In addition, I'll go to bed before 11 o'clock p.m. It's said that I'll nourish my kidneys, cough cough, for a month. I'll work hard to do that next month, cough cough, cough cough, so it'll be very impressive if I can make up for my lack of chapters in a few days this month. I reckon that I'll be able to update around 70 to 80 chapters. It's definitely impossible for me to explode in popularity. Secondly, I'll conserve my energy and do a good job of quality control. I'll take a look at the subscriptions in October. If the subscriptions can reach 7,000, I'll make a big fuss in November. I'll let our proud brothers have a good new year. It's already at 4,000 now. It's already increased by more than 220 this month. This number makes me depressed. Last month, we ranked second in terms of monthly votes and clicks. The additional 24-hour subscriptions are actually also at 220. Thirdly, my mistake is, cough cough, actually, everyone can tell that I've mentioned folding the heavens from the beginning. This means that there's more than one dimension. And in my outline, Zhiqiang is from the heavens beyond heaven. The boss of the Black Blood Forest is someone else. But I was very excited during that period of time. When I wrote there, I added Big Sister Z. Then I wrote for half a month. The more I wrote, the more I felt that something was amiss. The more I wrote, the more I felt. Damn, what's wrong? Why isn't the thrill of setting it up anymore? Then, when I finished writing, I started to read the subscriptions from the beginning. Only then did I realize that I kept getting the space-time wrong. Big Sister Z had transmigrated here. The original Black Blood Demon had also completely disappeared. I'm so depressed. Luckily, I thought of a solution. I've been scratching my head these few days. Chapter 962. Diwuqingyun's heart was filled with mixed feelings, sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy feelings. Once this happened, he knew that he would never be able to take revenge on the other party with his ability. The other party was a sword emperor, while he only had 2 monarch-level subordinates. Moreover, it was imaginable that the Zhuge clan would never offend one of the law enforcement masters, Han Xiaoran, because of him. Han Xiaoran's cultivation might not be high, but the people behind him were law enforcement officers and the Dharma Supreme. They had always been unfathomable experts. Therefore, Diwuqingyun could only seek help from Diwuqingru. Everyone knew that although Diwuqingru didn't have a clear position in the Diwu clan, he was indeed the number one. Even the few elders of the Diwu clan had tacitly acknowledged Diwuqingru's leading position. Moreover, Diwuqingyun had always felt that Diwuqingru didn't have any conflicts with him, and he could talk to him, and even helped him a few times. He didn't expect to be betrayed so miserably this time. This was actually the result. Of course, he didn't completely believe in what Chu Yang said. But when Chu Yang said the words Diwuqingru very clearly, he really felt dizzy and hopeless. Because Diwuqingru didn't tell anyone about his plan, including his trusted subordinates, and even his own wife. Only he knew. But now, Chu Yang also knew about it. So, if it wasn't Diwuqingru who told him, who else could it be? Please tell Lord Qingru that I know what he wants. I've done what he asked. Chu Yang smiled and said, If you have time, you can invite Lord Qingru over for a chat. Everyone can reminisce about the past and drink to the moon. Thank you for your meal, Lord Diwu. But we'll go out for this meal. I hope that the next meal will have fewer ingredients that shouldn't be in it. Law Enforcement Master Han is coming. If he sees this, I'm afraid he'll be very, very unhappy. Diwu Qingyan walked out dizzily. He hadn't regained his senses even after walking for a long distance. After walking out of the door and turning a corner, he felt that his hand was heavy. He didn't know when Chu Yang had passed him the food box. With a furious roar, he kicked out with his foot. Then, he walked towards Diwu Qingru angrily with his hands behind his back. Chu Yang winked at Zi Xiecheng casually. Zi Xiecheng held back her laughter and said, "So simple?" Chu Yang spread out his hands. "It's that simple," Zi Xiecheng said. "Originally, when I saw Diwu Qingru's plan, there was basically no way forward and no way back. In any case, we can only do things according to his calculations. I didn't expect that you would come straight to the point. You used the simplest method to break Diwu Qingru's plans." Chu Yang grunted and said, "Actually, the things in this world are very simple no matter how complicated they are. They could all be done in the simplest way. But when you don't see this simplicity, you have to keep going in circles, and you might even get lost in it." He pondered for a bit and said, "As a person, the most powerful way to deal with things is coincidentally the simplest way. That was magnanimity. But magnanimity doesn't mean that you don't have schemes. It definitely doesn't equate to stupidity." Zi Xiecheng muttered, "The most powerful way to be a person is to be magnanimous," she said 3 times and suddenly smiled. However, being magnanimous after seeing through the world and scheming is completely different from being magnanimous when you don't know anything about the world. "No, it's the same thing," Chu Yang said. "People often say that fortune favors fools. This is the truth. It's just that the former won't be at a disadvantage, but the latter will be at a disadvantage." Zi Xiecheng nodded silently. "Let's go out for a meal and take a look at the world's famous Tianji city. What kind of heavenly secrets does it have? How many people can see through heavenly secrets?" Chu Yang waved his hand and Chu Le cheered. "Let's go shopping." The 3 of them laughed and walked out of the door. Zi Xiecheng said as they walked, "In this Tianji city, people from the Zhuge clan can't see through their cultivation. Looking at it this way, it's really because they have practiced some divine techniques. But there's nothing special about this kind of divine technique that can hide one's aura. I know of quite a few divine techniques that can hide one's cultivation perfectly." Chu Yang laughed and said, "But this is also quite good. At least if we find someone to tell our fortune, we can find the most suitable person." But in his heart he thought, "Isn't this Zhuge clan's concealing one's strength and biding one similar to my 1,000 phantom technique? But, compared to my 1,000 phantom technique, the Zhuge clan's concealing one's strength and biding one's strength seems to be weaker. At least it can't imitate the aura of cultivation. I don't know the reason. But the Zhuge clan is famous in the field of fortune-telling and divination. I have to take a look at it." Diwu Qingru sat solemnly in the courtyard. Around him, there were pieces of purple crystals, each occupying a position. They emitted a purple glow. If one took a closer look, one would realize that each piece of purple crystals was actually in the shape of a heart. They were all the rare purple crystal jade cores. Diwu Qingru held 7 copper coins in his hands. Each copper coin was very round and very smooth. One could tell that they had been played with for a long time. He sat solemnly with his legs crossed. An inexplicable aura was emitted from his body and turned into Tao, shooting into the purple crystal continuously and accurately. Vaguely, it seemed as if the whole earth vein had lit up. Under the ground where the purple crystal was, there was a faint brilliance flowing, gradually forming a big circle. And Diwu Qingru's body was sitting in the middle of this circle. When the heavenly secrets are in chaos, I actually have to predict the heavenly secrets. Using my heart to predict the heavens. Using my heart to predict the heavens. I wonder what the fate of the Diwu clan is. Diwu Qingru muttered to himself in a self-deprecating manner. His eyes stared at the purple crystal jade core in front of him without blinking. After a long time, a faint whooshing sound that was almost inaudible rang out. Immediately, above the purple crystal jade core, a faint 7-colored rainbow suddenly floated up. It was the light from the earth vein that rose up. It paused in the air and then slowly rose up. After rising up to 100 feet in the air, it slowly became fainter. Gradually, above Diwu Qingrou's head, 7 faintly glowing stars appeared. They were arranged according to the position of the Big Dipper, quietly lying across the void. Diwu Qingrou took a deep breath. His hands that were placed together slowly separated, and the copper coins that were originally in his palms slowly floated up. They didn't fall down. They quietly arranged themselves in the air between his palms. When his hands were fully opened, the 7 copper coins quietly floated in front of his chest. Near his chest, the 7 copper coins were arranged in the shape of the Big Dipper, quietly suspended in the air. They were symmetrical with the 7 brilliant stars formed by the heart to predict the heavens in the sky. After a moment of silence, the starlight in the sky began to flash. It seemed to be in order. The 7 flashing spots flickered one after another. In front of Diwu Qingrou's chest, the 7 copper coins also flickered. The order was the same as in the sky. There was absolutely no difference. They flickered 10 times like this. The starlight in the sky became constant, and the copper coins in front of Diwu Qingrou's chest began to roll. They were strangely rolling in the void, but they didn't move from the beginning to the end. A mysterious power seemed to be coming from the ancient high heavens. It was vast and full of terrifying coercion. Diwu Qingrou's forehead was already sweating. He felt that his mind seemed to be attracted by this mysterious power of heaven and earth. Then, Diwu Qingrou's 10 fingers began to move in order. The 7 copper coins also began to roll in different directions. His 10 fingers flicked one after another, and then flicked in the opposite direction again. After 10 times, the light in the sky disappeared. The copper coins fell from the sky, and the purple crystal jade core returned to its original state. This was the time when the heavenly secret was revealed. Diwu Qingrou carefully calculated. He had no distractions in his mind. He was completely focused. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 45 times, 78 times, 13 times, 15 times, he was about to succeed. Diwu Qingrou was overjoyed. He didn't expect it to be so smooth this time. He didn't dare to mess up. His forehead was steaming hot, 18 times. The fate of the Diwu clan was about to be revealed in front of him. The starlight in the sky was already a little dim. But it was definitely not too late. 10 times, the first flick, the second flick, beside him, the 2 experts of the Diwu clan who were guarding him also couldn't help but hold their breaths. Looking at this mysterious scene, they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They only felt that their hearts had stopped beating. He was trying to predict the heavens. They didn't expect to be lucky enough to see the most ancient and powerful secret technique in this life. At this moment, boom! A loud sound was heard from the main door. This sound was like the collapse of the heavens and the earth in this silent place. The entire main door was kicked into smithereens. Then, an extremely angry voice was heard. Diwu Qingrou! You bastard! I treated you as a brother, but you actually betrayed me like this. Then, Diwu Qingyun rushed in furiously. As he ran, he scolded. Damn you! Damn you! It's good that you betrayed me! It's good that you betrayed me! Diwu Qingrou was at the most critical juncture. Suddenly being disturbed like this, he instantly felt as if his chest was fiercely hammered by the gods. The starlight in the sky suddenly disappeared, and on the ground several purple crystal jade cores exploded one after another, turning into purple crystal powder on the ground. 7 copper coins fell from the sky like dead fish. Wah! Diwu Qingrou opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of scarlet blood. Then, he spat out another mouthful of blood, and another mouthful of blood. In an instant, he had already spat all over the ground. Being disturbed at the most important moment of calculating the heavenly secrets, how could such a huge backlash of heaven and earth be easy to bear? Diwu Qingrou's face turned sallow. He turned his head bit by bit with difficulty. Then, he stared at Diwu Qingyun who was rushing over. Chapter 963. Diwu Qingyun still wanted to clamor, but he saw Diwu Qingrou's cold gaze. Beside him, The two martial saint experts of the Diwu clan looked at him fiercely with a face full of despair, shame and fury. The two martial saint experts were on the verge of breaking down. The two of them were responsible for guarding Diwu Qingru. Diwu Qingru had instructed them many times, and the two of them promised solemnly. Who would have thought that at the last moment, the two of them were shocked by the power of the heavens and earth, and unknowingly started to watch. But at this moment, Diwu Qingyun barged in. Usually, no one would come to Diwu Qingru's courtyard even if it was a few months. And Diwu Qingru never liked to be disturbed. It could be said to be extremely quiet. This time, in order to avoid any disturbances, Diwu Qingru even specially invited two martial saint experts to guard him. And he repeatedly instructed them to pay attention to the movements outside the door. Once something happened, even if it was to kill someone, they were not to let anyone in. No matter from which aspect, it was absolutely foolproof. However, things were just so strange. Just when you thought that everything was foolproof, something happened. And it happened at the last moment. Everything was in vain. At the last moment, the door was actually destroyed. At this moment, Diwu Qingru's frustration was really indescribable. But he didn't show his fury. He shook his head tiredly, turned back, waved his hand and said softly, "Drag him out and behead him." Diwu Qingyun was shocked. You betrayed me, and you still..." But before he finished his words, he was already picked up by the two martial saint experts fiercely. They dragged him out. Only then did Diwu Qingyun know that Diwu Qingru was serious. He couldn't help but struggle in fear. Qingru! Qingru! You can't do this to me! You can't!" He kept retreating as he was dragged out. He shouted and finally lost all hope. "I'm the warden of the Zhuge clan. What right do you have to punish me? What right do you have?" Diwu Qingru lowered his head and didn't say anything. After a long time, a scream came from outside. The two saint-level experts flew in and stood solemnly in front of Diwu Qingru. "Qingru, we..." Their faces were full of shame. Diwu Qingru heaved a long sigh. Then, he insipidly said, "This is the will of heaven. I don't blame you." If he were to blame them, the two of them would feel a little better. But he really didn't blame them. The two martial saints' faces turned even redder and paler. "It's my fault." Diwu Qingru smiled and said, "I should have thought of this. Moreover, there should have been a few people standing guard at the entrance, but I didn't think of that. Which led to this time." Then, he waved his hand tiredly. "You guys can leave. I've suffered a backlash and need to rest." The two martial saints retreated with complicated expressions. Diwu Qingru slowly stood up. His body staggered, and blood overflowed from the corners of his mouth. His expression was somewhat weary, but it was also filled with doubt. "Why? I should have thought of this sentry post, but why didn't I think of it? Even if the existence of ordinary people would interfere with the heavenly secrets, wouldn't it be fine as long as they stood at the entrance of the street? Why didn't I think of that? This shouldn't have happened." Diwu Qingru sighed. In fact, this matter was really unimaginable. There was really no reason to blame anyone. The two martial saints were in a remote and desolate place. With the divine senses of martial saints, no one could enter within a radius of 1,000 feet. Why did they need to guard the door? They were disturbed so violently even under such circumstances. There was really nothing to say. Diwu Qingru had actually miscalculated one thing. That was, when one's heart was testing the heavens, as long as one saw that kind of situation, one's mind would be attracted. But how could Diwu Qingru think of everything when he used the secret technique of testing the heavens for the first time? Is this really the will of the heavens? Is the will of the heavens so that I can't see the future of the Diwu clan? Diwu Qingru said quietly. He rolled up his long sleeves and rolled the 7 copper coins on the ground into his hands. Then, he took 2 steps towards the room and walked to the front of the stone table. He stood still and his body swayed a bit. He raised his hand to support the stone table. Finally, he couldn't help but slap down. The stone table was smashed into pieces. Diwu Qingrou's fury was finally vented. I wanted to borrow Chu Yang's hand to get rid of him. I didn't expect that I would be the one to do it in the end. This time, I'm at a disadvantage again. Diwu Qingrou talked to himself and said in a self-deprecating manner, King of Hell Chu, can't you let me scheme against you just once? He thought of how he had used his wisdom to bring peace to the world. His schemes had always been successful. But he had always been defeated by Chu Yang. He couldn't help but feel depressed. He heaved a long sigh and said, This is the will of the heavens. Here's an explanation. Many people say that it's ridiculous that Diwu Qingrou was disturbed while he was calculating the heavenly secrets. But this saying is really ridiculous. Let's just give an example. Zhuge Liang's Big Dipper lamp was extinguished by Wei Yan at the last moment. Moreover, that was much more important than Diwu Qingrou. Not to mention Diwu Qingrou at this moment. It's just a novel. Don't take it seriously. Moreover, I added an explanation here. But Luo De didn't say anything. If I say so, wouldn't I be more powerful than Luo De? Chu Yan walked on the streets and saw people coming and going. It was bustling with activity. But it was rare to see disputes. It could be seen that the security in this city was very good. Xi Xiecheng was wearing a veil. Not many people dared to disturb her. After the meal, the three of them strolled on the streets. They wandered in the east and wandered in the west. Do you think Diwu Qingrou will be depressed? Chu Yang smiled and asked. He will definitely be depressed. But I'm curious about what he will do next time. Xi Xiecheng smiled and said, This person's wisdom and scheming really make me gasp in amazement. I can't wait to see the two of you fight. Chu Yang snorted and said, You guys are watching the fun. But we don't know how many twists and turns we have to go through in order to resolve each of the other's attacks or counterattacks. The three of them moved forward with the surging tide of people while talking faintly. Chuler's small head turned left and right. It was too much for her eyes to take in. Although she was smart, she was still young. She was curious about everything. In a short while, her pockets were filled with all kinds of gadgets. She even had a bag of wisdom in her hand. She peeled and ate as she walked. The little girl was beaming with joy as she ate. She was also extremely happy. There was a group of people in front of them. Someone was predicting words. A big cloth sign was erected in the crowd. One word to predict good or bad luck, one word to see the secrets of heaven, one word to ask about fortune and misfortune, one word to decide marriage. These were the words on the signboard. Xi Xiecheng took a look and said, What does this say? Chu Yang said, It means that you write a word. Then, based on this word, he will be able to deduce your past and present life, marriage, wealth, fortune and misfortune, life and death. Xi Xiecheng snorted and looked at the signboard. She said, What arrogance! If he can see everything just by writing a word, then it will really be the work of a deity. I'll go and take a look. Chu Yang pulled her back. What's the point of looking at such a scammer? Xi Xiecheng said. I'll write a word for him to see. Let's see if this little one is really talented. Chu Yang had no choice but to follow her. The three of them squeezed their way in. Chu Yang was at the front. He simply released his cultivation and attacked their way in. There was an empty space in the room. There was a table, a stack of white paper, a writing brush and an inkstone. An old man whose clothes had been washed until they were white sat behind the table. His face was thin and his expression was serene. In front of him, there was a man in white. He looked like a foreigner and was predicting his words. In front of him, the word heaven was written in ink. It seemed that the word that this man in white wanted to test was this word heaven. Using heaven to test himself. This little thing is quite arrogant. Xi Xiecheng snorted. At this moment, the thin old man took the word and studied it for a while before raising his head to look at the white-clothed man's expression and said, Dear guests, the word you want to read is about your future. But here, I usually say what I see. If you don't listen to me, please don't blame me. The man in white laughed and said, Why would I blame you? I'm just taking it as a joke." The people around him laughed together. The old man's expression did not change. He said, "This word heaven. The way you wrote it was full of strength and vigor. It can be seen that you are used to bossing people around and you are very conceited. As a person, you are a little headstrong and self-opinionated. You have to take note of this." The man in white's expression changed. The old man did not say everything, but it was equivalent to saying that he was arrogant, proud, self-opinionated, and extremely conceited. And he was usually high and mighty. That was exactly who he was talking about. His expression softened a little. He said, "Please continue." The old man looked at the word heaven carefully and said, "This word heaven means one big. You think you are very big, but there is still someone above you, blocking your path. This word heaven is already the biggest word. So, even if you have endless schemes and tricks in this life, you are destined to be unable to make a name for yourself." The old man raised his head and looked at the man in white. He said in a deep voice, "If you have the heart, remove it quickly. It can ensure your safety for the rest of your life. You have to know that if heaven makes a name for himself, he will no longer be heaven." The man in white started to sweat profusely. He thanked the old man and threw down a piece of purple crystal. Then, he left with his subordinates, who were somewhat indignant, without looking back. From this reaction, it could be seen that the old man's words were not wrong. The old man raised his head and looked at the crowd. He said, "Who else needs to have their words read? Only one purple crystal is needed for each word read." Everyone shook their heads. One purple crystal was needed for each word read. Only the man in white, who was like a nouveau riche, would do such a thing. One had to know that a piece of purple crystal, if converted into silver, was enough for an ordinary family to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. They could even save up some inheritance. "Let me do it." Zixieqing took a step forward and sat opposite the old man. The old man's eyes flashed. He said, "May I know what word you want to test?" Zixieqing sneered and said, "I want to test this word." She picked up the brush and wrote a big word in a flamboyant manner. Once this word came out, the crowd was in an uproar. It was also the word heaven. Chapter 964. Another heaven! That green-robed elder looked at Zixieqing and was silent for a while. Zixieqing's face was covered by a white veil. It was so hazy that it was impossible to see clearly. "This heaven is not that heaven, ah! Ha! Each heaven has its own weight." The elder's eyes were deep as he looked at this word carefully. He said in a low voice, "Miss, may I ask what you are trying to ask by writing this word? Are you trying to test your marriage and future? Life and death? Or other things?" Zixieqing said lightly. "Future." It was the same as the white-robed man just now. The onlookers were instantly shocked. Everyone could feel that this white-robed lady was here to make trouble. The same word, testing the same direction. Could it be that there was another answer? It couldn't be that heaven. There are male and female heavens, right? The old man smiled and said, "Since Miss wants to test your future, then this old man will speak for you." As he said, he took out a stalk of grass and compared it with the word Zixieqing wrote. He closed his eyes and said slowly, "Mrs. Heaven has a majestic aura and is written in one breath. Its shape is like a flying dragon, its aura is like a dancing phoenix, its power is like a celestial mountain, and its intent is in the sky. The sky is high, and it is like a jade pavilion. It naturally has a kind of glorious and ancient aura, but it is not the heaven of the heaven. The heaven of the heaven does not have such an aura. In this case, Miss, you should not belong to this world. Or rather, your future will not be this heaven." He opened his eyes lightly and said, "This is from the aura of your word. The aura affects the meaning of the word, so the meaning of the word is different." Zixieqing squinted her eyes behind the veil and said lightly, "Oh?" The old man chuckled and gestured the word Tian with the straw. He said, "Tian means one big, or one person, or two people. Therefore, Miss, you can move unhindered in the Tian, the so-called two people." At first glance, one person means that at first, it should be one person, but at second glance, it is actually two people. So now, it has become two. Oh? Xi Xieching's eyes were a little solemn. The old man chuckled and said, Miss wrote this word with righteous indignation. However, when you wrote it, you naturally chose this day and did not deliberately make things difficult for this old man. This old man can see that. Furthermore, the words that Miss wrote seemed a little ethereal. Was Miss looking for someone? Moreover, she couldn't find him. The heavens were high and unfathomable. This was the girl's hesitation. Therefore, your future should be to find someone. Xi Xieching's eyelids drooped, as if she was deep in thought, as if she was silently agreeing. The old man said, Miss, the word Tian that comes out of your heart shows that there is someone in your heart who is a Tian. You respect him like you respect the heavens. This is the person you're looking for. At the side, Chu Yang was already stunned. This old man was truly extraordinary. With just a single word, he was able to say so much. One had to know that there was a lot of knowledge involved in fortune-telling. However, the most important thing was that it was vague. It was specious to say that it was a guide to the north. If you asked him to calculate that you're going to make a fortune, he seemed to have confirmed it. However, if you're going to make a fortune and come back to find trouble with him, he would be able to find a reasonable explanation from what he originally said to you. This is what I've told you before. Why do you think that I'm going to make a fortune? Look at this sentence, look here, everything is going well. Therefore, fortune-telling in the martial world was all based on one's mouth. Being true and false at the same time, false and true at the same time, was the highest realm. As for the truly wise and powerful people, they would not easily reveal the truth. Was it easy to reveal the secrets of heaven? However, every word that this old man said was true. There was no ambiguity. It was clear, and definitely not vague. Moreover, what he calculated was almost the truth. This was what made Chu Yang extremely surprised. At this moment, the old man continued, Heaven is unfathomable and cannot be found. Therefore, Miss, the person that you're looking for should not have been found yet. Xi Xieching was silent and did not speak. That old man looked at her with some pity and said, Miss, you wrote this word with a kind of respect in your heart. Therefore, this word is full of spirit and energy, like sand floating in the clouds. Moreover, all things in the world are actually feelings. Mrs. Heart is a kind of grace of rebirth. This also shows that Miss only has respect and feelings for the person you're looking for, and it's not a love affair. If this heaven is a sorrowful heaven, sentimental, then the atmosphere will be different. The old man chuckled and said, Therefore, I can't guarantee your future. However, I can say that in this life of yours, there will be no danger and misfortune will be turned into blessings. As for your future, it's both the path under your feet and the sky. Where you go from here, it's all up to you. Xi Xieching said with some confusion. Then may I ask, Master, if the person that I'm looking for can be found? Her tone had completely become respectful and asking for advice. The old man sighed and said, Let me say a few words to you. Xi Xieching said, Please speak. The old man said, As I said just now, Miss was originally one person, but now you are two people. Ha! He was silent for a while and recited in a low voice. The great Tao is boundless, what is true? The sky is high, and there's no need to waste one's energy. A lifetime of hard work, half of one's life drifting without seeing the door. How can one's heart be divided into two? If one wants to travel the heavens a few times, why not cherish the person in front of him? A lifetime of hard work, half of one's life drifting without seeing the door. Why not cherish the person in front of him? One. Xi Xieching muttered a few words. After a long time, she suddenly said, But I don't have the person in front of me. She suddenly smiled and threw a piece of purple crystal. She said, At least your novel makes some sense. Then, she floated up. Everyone was stunned. This lady was really temperamental. It was obvious that she already thought that what he said made sense, and had already paid the divination fee, but she was still stubborn. Moreover, her tone was a little too big. She actually said that this old man was this little. Damn, how old are you? Calling an old man little? But that old man did not take it to heart. He stroked his beard and smiled. Since that's the case, thank you for your reward. His eyes, which had seen through the world, revealed a smile like spring water. He said, To be able to meet someone like you in this life, my life has not been in vain. Xi Xiecheng snorted with a smile and turned her head away without replying. That old man chuckled again. Suddenly, he turned his head and looked at Chu Yang. He said, Little friend, are you interested in testing a word too? Chu Yang pondered for a while and said, Since that's the case, there's no harm in testing one. As he said, he sat down leisurely. This old man was obviously not from the Zhuge clan. But here, his aura was similar to the aura of the Zhuge clan. No one could tell that he was not from the Zhuge clan. Some of the Zhuge clan's warriors even looked at him with respect when they passed by. That was obviously an expression that would only appear when they saw an elder from their own clan. But this old man's expression was indifferent, and he did not reply to this. Moreover, there seemed to be a faint mischievous smile. This made Chu Yang a little surprised. And this old man's cultivation was also as vast as the sea. He could not see through it at all. If he could not see through it, it would be pardonable. But Xi Xiecheng did not say anything about it. That was a little unusual. So Chu Yang took a step forward and sat in front of the table. He wanted to see which side this old man belonged to. That old man looked at Chu Yang as he sat down. He raised his eyebrows and looked at him carefully. His eyebrows trembled slightly. He said, Since you've sat down, what word would you like to test? The moment he raised his eyes, Chu Yang clearly realized that this old man's eyes were deep and bottomless. It was like looking into a cold pond in autumn. One only knew its coldness but did not know its depth. At a glance, one could say that there was a firmament and a galaxy in it. It seemed that it was completely possible. Chu Yang thought for a while and smiled. Old man, you have the means of an immortal. No matter what I write, you should be able to see it. When I heard the word test just now, it really opened my eyes. I'm full of admiration. The old man stroked his beard and smiled. He said, Little friend, you flatter me. The rest of the martial world is just a way to make a living. It's to make people laugh and earn a few mouthfuls of food. Chu Yang smiled and said, Old man, you're too modest. May I know your name? The old man chuckled and said, Young man, you sure know my roots. He pondered for a while and said, I'm an idler who doesn't know much about worldly affairs. I've been here for a long time. These few days I've been thinking about something and came here for a visit. As for my name, it's just a nickname. It's fine if I don't say it. Old man, you must be a senior expert. I've been disrespectful. Chu Yang laughed and did not probe further. The old man laughed and said, I rise with the wind and fall with the wind. I watch the clouds float and fly with the clouds. I've been carefree for a long time. I'm not like little friend, who has the disposition of dragons and phoenixes, who have the ambition to be free and unfettered in the heavens. Chu Yang's eyes flashed and said, Experts who don't belong to worldly affairs are the most carefree. In my life, I'm the one who admires such carefree people the most. The old man laughed and said, Little friend, what word do you want to test? Chu Yang raised the brush and said, The word I want to test. Old man, you've already tested it twice just now. The tip of the brush spread out on a piece of white paper in front of him. The force penetrated the back of the paper and the momentum was heavy. It was as if two armies were fighting. The murderous aura was awe-inspiring and vigorous. It was exactly two armies facing off against each other. Just by looking at the movement of his brush, one could feel the desperation of the battlefield. Under the illumination of the setting sun, millions of soldiers faced off against each other. The desolate night wind whistled and fell. A bugle horn sounded, signaling life and death. A battle cry opened hell. Sabers were unsheathed, arrows were knocked, and war horses galloped out. Where the smoke of war passed, blood flowed all over the ground. Chu Yang put down the brush gently and looked at it carefully. Then, he pushed it gently and said with a smile, "Old man, please." When the crowd saw this word, they could not help but become restless again. They all whispered to each other. The expressions on their faces were very interesting. Today was really strange. In such a short period of time, 3 people came to test their words consecutively. And they actually tested the same word. This time, Chu Yang actually wrote another word on the paper. Heaven! I woke up early today and wrote when I had nothing to do. I actually wrote a chapter. Haha, I'm going to the hospital now. I'll come back in the afternoon and write again. Looking at this situation, there should be more chapters today. So I beg for monthly votes. Everyone, give me a few votes. Let's go to the top 3 monthly votes today. If we get more votes, we can also make third young master, who's currently in first place, feel nervous. Wouldn't that be great? Dong dong dong. War drums. Humph humph humph. That ha. Chapter 965. The old man looked at this word and smiled bitterly, saying, "Little friend, you've really given me a difficult problem." On the same day, 3 people in a row tested the same word. "Little friend, you're trying to ruin my reputation." Chu Yang smiled and said, "Elder's reputation is made of copper and iron. Ordinary people won't be able to ruin it." The old man laughed and said, "It's a pity that you're not an ordinary person." He emphasized the words ordinary person a little, as if he meant something else. As he said, he picked up that piece of paper and looked at it carefully. He praised, "Good word. Good word. It's really written with iron and silver hooks, vaguely showing signs of war and killing intent. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood, white bones everywhere, the setting sun and the west wind, the extinction of hundreds of races. Looking at this word, it's like looking at a folded sky." He raised his head and looked at Chu Yang. He smiled and said, "Little friend, the sin of killing in this life is very serious." Chu Yang smiled and said, "Elder, please enlighten me." The old man's expression became serious and he said, "May I ask what you want to test?" Chu Yang smiled lightly and said, "Since others are asking about the future, I naturally want to test my future too." When this sentence came out, everyone's expression became strange. First, there was a man in white who wrote heaven and asked about the future. Then, there was a lady who wrote heaven and asked about the future. Now, there was a young man who wrote heaven and asked about the future again. Today's matter was really eye-opening. The old man smiled bitterly again. This future, ha ha ha, can't little friend ask about something else? Isn't this making things difficult for me?" Chu Yang smiled and said, "To others it may be difficult, but to you, it's definitely not difficult." The old man laughed loudly. "Because of this word, I can only try my best to protect my reputation first." He held this word and looked at it carefully. He also used the stalk of grass to gesture a few times before he sighed and said, "The word written by the man in white just now was full of arrogance and ambition. On the other hand, this young lady's writing was light and graceful, ethereal and unpredictable. However, the words written by little friend are different from those of the other 2. They are more solid and full of murderous intent." He raised his head and looked at Chu Yang. "Although that white-robed man is unruly, he still has respect for the heavens." This young lady wrote in a carefree manner, but she still had respect for the heavens. "But you," Chu Yang said calmly. "Me? What about me?" The old man sighed and said, "Your heart has no sky. Your heart doesn't have the sky." These words made Chu Yang's heart tremble. He smiled and said, "Do you really think that there is such a thing as heaven?" The old man smiled and said, "Of course." Chu Yang persistently asked, "Since there is such a thing, where is heaven?" The old man frowned and said, "The sky is naturally above." As he said this, he pointed and said, "Look up and you will see the blue sky." Chu Yang smiled and said, "Do you have proof?" The old man was displeased. "What proof do you need? The sky is high, and there is no limit. What is the limit? Chu Yang asked. Limitless. The old man smiled warmly and replied, Since it is limitless, where is heaven? Chu Yang sneered. The old man was stunned and stared at him for a long time. He shook his head gently and said, I will not argue with you. Chu Yang laughed loudly. The old man was silent for a while and said, You are now at the stage of defying the heavens. One day, when your heart has developed respect for heaven, you will be able to take a step further in the extreme of this world. Such repetition is the truth of the great Tao. Chu Yang thought for a while and said seriously, Although I don't agree with it now, I will remember this sentence. The old man looked at the heaven that Chu Yang had written again, and a strange expression appeared on his face. He said, This heaven, although it has high aspirations, it has a sense of emptiness. It has the vague image of yin and yang. Little friend, you are not a reincarnated person. Chu Yang felt his heart skip a beat. The old man chuckled and said, Little friend, this heaven means one big. Here, it is not one person or two people, but a large group of people. Heaven, since there is no heaven in one's heart, one has to go against heaven. Heaven is the extreme, it is the extreme of numbers. Therefore, little friend, what you are relying on is one person. Yes, even more. Chu Yang's heart shook. He was about to stop the old man from continuing. But he heard the old man change the topic automatically. The heaven that little friend wrote, although there is a sense of war, it is heavy and stable. It is symmetrical from top to bottom, and it has both sides. It is enough to show that little friend has feelings and righteousness in his heart. And this righteousness is the heart of heaven. Therefore, regarding your future, little friend's future, it is full of killing. However, there are too many people in this world that can be killed. It is not impossible. He looked at Chu Yang meaningfully and said, I just said a few words to this lady. Now I will also say a few words to little friend. Chu Yang said seriously, Please speak, I will remember it in my heart. The old man pondered for a while and said, A sword lies across the world. Kill those who should be killed. Do not make things difficult for them. The sea of blood has its own path of light. Above and below the bones, there is heaven. How can heaven's secrets tolerate the mortal world? Walking alone in the world is not perplexed. Do not worry about the road ahead. When has loneliness ever been by your side? Jasper flowers, evil clouds, evil clouds, evil clouds, no wounds, no scars, peace, no regrets. Have the heart to defeat the enemy and win. Once you see the devil, talk carefully. There will be a time when you return to one. Parting the clouds and mist, there will be another mountain. Do not know the end of this life. Do not believe in heaven so easily. Chu Yang's heart exploded like spring thunder. His mind was buzzing. These words summed up everything in his life. Who exactly is this old man? Xiao Yun Mo Qing Wu. This sentence could not be clearer. Firstly, it was to be cautious. Secondly, it was Mo Qing Wu's name. But the road of 3 lives can mend heaven. This, Chu Yang's heart was buzzing. For a moment, he did not know where his body was and where his heart was. In a daze, he was actually in a daze. The crowd around him was surging. The noise was endless. But at this moment, it seemed that they were all far away from him. And he himself fell into a kind of absolute silence. Somehow, he seemed to have come to a place. This place was full of darkness. There was only one bright road, winding into the distance. A figure flashed and a person appeared in front of him. Chu Yang took a closer look. It was actually the old man who had divined for him just now. The old man smiled and said, Take a look at the place you have never been to. Go. One day, we will meet again. Little friend, you have to get out of my hands. Although it is heaven's will, it also makes me a little unhappy. Ha ha. But your heart does not have heaven. This makes me very happy. He raised his hand and a ray of white light shot into Chu Yang's forehead. He smiled faintly and said, If there is a future, don't forget our friendship today. Then, he pushed Chu Yang and laughed. Go, rush out of heaven. That is heaven! The old man's figure suddenly flew up in the midst of his laughter. Chu Yang only felt that he kept retreating. Finally, after an unknown period of time, he finally fell down. He let out a soft cry. He looked up abruptly but felt that the sunlight was dazzling. He closed his eyes and reminisced for a while. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Zi Xiecheng and Chu Le's worried eyes. He couldn't help but be shocked. When he looked at the opposite side, he saw that the table and chair were still there. But the old man was no longer there. Where is he? Chu Yang asked. He left. Zi Xiecheng had a strange look on her face. She said, I wanted to stop him, but he laughed and disappeared into thin air. Chu Yang was shocked. When Zi Xiecheng said disappeared into thin air, it meant that he disappeared into thin air without using any martial arts. Otherwise, no matter what, Zi Xiecheng would be able to catch up with him and catch him. But obviously, there was nothing she could do about this old man. Thinking carefully about every word that the old man said, Chu Yang seemed to understand something in his heart. But he also seemed to be more confused. He stood up in a daze, as if he had just had a dream. He said, Let's go back. He walked back unsteadily. Zi Xiecheng and Chu Le followed behind him worriedly. Chu Le pulled Zi Xiecheng's hand and said, Sister Zi, what's wrong with brother? Zi Xiecheng frowned and said softly, I don't know either. She faintly felt that Chu Yang's spirit seemed to have left his body for a moment. But in the next moment, it came back. The time was extremely short, and she also felt a little confused. They walked all the way back. When they reached a junction, they suddenly heard a loud cry. A group of people carrying a coffin turned from the front. Chu Yang took a closer look and saw that the two people were actually the people who followed Diwu Qingyun to deliver the food boxes in the morning. He couldn't help but be moved. He pulled the person beside him and asked, Who died? Master Diwu Qingyun died of a sudden illness. That person was a martial artist from the Zhuge clan. Since Chu Yang was here, he must be a doctor of the medicine banquet. How would he dare to neglect him? Diwu Qingyun is dead? Chu Yang frowned. Suddenly, he felt a little strange. He thought to himself, could it be that Diwu Qingyun went to find Diwu Qingru to settle scores, and Diwu Qingru was blamed for not succeeding in his scheme, so he actually killed him in a fit of anger? But Diwu Qingru is definitely not such a narrow-minded person. Chu Yang's guess was right. Diwu Qingru was of course not such a person who would kill in a fit of anger. But Diwu Qingyun had really messed up Diwu Qingru's plans. For such a matter, not to mention Diwu Qingru, even Chu Yang himself would not be able to stop himself from killing. Moreover, Diwu Qingyun was the person that Diwu Qingru wanted to kill. Noises, exclamations and excited voices came from afar. Someone shouted, The South Law Enforcement Master, the Southeast Law Enforcement Master and the North Law Enforcement Master have arrived. Another voice came from another direction. The number one ruling clan of the heavens, the Yi clan, has also arrived. This voice was nearer. Those three law enforcement masters seemed to have turned a corner from the other side and were led to other places to rest by the Zhuge clan. However, the people from the Yi clan had come straight here. Chu Yang pulled the two people to stand by the roadside. He was a little moved. The people from the Yi clan had come. But he didn't know if the famous Yi Chuchen master's wife would come too? The second update. Something happened at home. Due to the delay, I continued to write the third update. Chapter 966. Part 7 Chapter 244 Paying him back in his own coin. Following the sound of orderly footsteps, a group of people came from afar and turned the corner. It made people feel as if the heavens and earth had turned dark. Black clothes, black robes, black horse. At this moment, the light in the sky finally disappeared. Endless dusk descends upon the earth. The people on the street corner had a feeling that with the arrival of the Yi family, this boundless land had also entered the land of the night. This night, it seems like it was brought here by this group of people. Chu Yang's heart was also filled with killing intent. The Yi clan's reputation is indeed well-deserved. Just by looking at this imposing and domineering aura, he was worthy of being the leader of the heavens. Just as he was thinking about it, a soft voice suddenly rang out. "Second brother, just let me play for a bit." "Play for a bit, okay." Okay. Chu Yang, Zi Xieching and Chu Lur all got goosebumps at the same time. She turned around and saw Yi Shiyu trembling uncontrollably as he gripped the arm of a burly man. He was pouting and shaking him. This situation reminded Chu Yang of Mo Qingwu. Mo Qingwu had followed him all the way to the far north wilderness. Sometimes she would shake her arm and pout. "Brother Chu Yang, I want this. At that time, Chu Yang's heart melted. But now, Chu Yang's heart had also softened. However, this crispness were definitely not the same crispness. The former was a feeling of happiness and satisfaction, but now, it was a feeling of terror. This transvestite was really something. She turned around and saw Chu Lur's pale face. Her mouth was slightly agape, and her face was filled with shock. Zi Xieching was scratching her right arm with her left hand, and nibbling on it gently. It was obvious that this big sister had goosebumps all over her body again. When he turned around, he saw the burly man waving his hand hurriedly. "Dodge! Get out of my way! You, get up and go to one side! I'll hit you!" Even though Yi Shiyu was on the horse, he had already leaned his body weakly. He blinked his eyes in a charming and pitiful manner. "Second brother!" Her voice was soft, sweet, and tender. The burly man shuddered, and his face turned pale. He turned around and screamed, "Save me!" Yi Shiyu giggled and covered his mouth with one hand. Chu Yang's pupils constricted in horror. These 5 fingernails were actually painted bright red, and each fingernail was so long. Behind him, a black horse carriage, a helpless yet gentle voice, a voice. "Little you! How long are you going to fool around?" Yi Shiyu lowered his head. "I don't dare." A helpless sigh came from inside. You. Then he's 10s too. That Yi Shiyu's 2's 4s, Yi Shiyu's 7's 6, but Yi Shiyu didn't bother with him anymore. Yi Shiyu had already discovered a person, and this person was rather interesting to him. Chu Yang felt that something was amiss, and was about to slip away, because Yi Shiyu's gaze happened to land on him. Chu Yang didn't forget that Yi Shiyu had invited him to the Lake of Despair 3 days ago. If he were to be bothered by him this time, just the invitation alone would give him a headache. Not to mention, if Yi Shiyu were to ask him about his background, with Yi Shiyu's intelligence, he might be able to deduce some clues. No matter what, it was extremely bad for Chu Yang. Therefore, Chu Yang wanted to slip away immediately. But it was already too late. Yi Shiyu had finally discovered a familiar person. How could he let him go so easily? Brother Chu? Oh my, isn't this Brother Chu? Hee. I'm really surprised. Brother Chu, oh Brother Chu, when did you come up? Yi Shiyu floated over like a gust of wind. It was as if he had suddenly discovered a new continent. He stood in front of Chu Yang, raised his eyebrows, and rubbed his head. He said shyly, "Brother Chu, I've been waiting for you in the upper 3 heavens for a long time." He had seen Chu Yang at the Lake of Despair and was astonished by Chu Yang's talent. He had sent an invitation to Chu Yang before, so how could he not recognize him? Chu Yang's eyes widened, and he felt that his legs were about to go soft. He was sweating profusely. Yi Shiyu strode forward gracefully. His orchid fingers flickered as he tilted his head and swayed his butt. About to walk over, the burly man on the horse suddenly felt relieved and almost laughed out loud. He looked over with interest, as if he was watching a joke. Even the knights of the Yi family were smiling as they watched the 3 dukes of the Yi family catching people. Chu Yang's heart calmed down. He suddenly thought of Zhuge, and instantly came up with a brilliant idea. "Sister Yi," Chu Yang called out tenderly. Yi Shiyu was stunned. He stared at Chu Yang with his eyes wide open. His entire body was petrified. His orchid fingers were in the air, and his butt was also frozen. His entire body was frozen in an extremely discordant posture. Sister Yi, you don't know how much I regret rejecting your invitation back then, Chu Yang said affectionately. He strode forward and hugged Yishiyu in his arms. Sister Yi, I miss you so much. I came to the upper three heavens to find you. Do you know how hard it was for me to find you? Yishiyu stood there in a daze. His eyes were already in a daze. His face turned from red to white, and from white to red. His legs were also trembling. He only felt that the front and back of his lower body were in pain. He was hugged by Chu Yang like a puppet. He actually lost the ability to think. Drops of cold sweat came out from the tip of his nose. Chu Yang gently stroked Yishiyu's back and said tenderly, Sister Yi, you don't know. After you left that day, I drank alone under the moonlight. My heart was filled with emotions. It's hard to find a confidant in life. Especially for people like us, it's even harder. Yishiyu shuddered violently and stammered. What about you? Chu Yang rolled his eyes and continued to massage him. I hesitated, I was lost. But now, I finally mustered up the courage to come and find you, oh my God. Yishiyu screamed at the top of his lungs. Then, he stumbled along the way, and didn't know where he was going. He turned around 3 times before he found his own team. Then, he rushed in as if he had seen a ghost. He didn't hesitate to get into the carriage. Then, his voice was heard from inside the carriage. Oh my God, and save me. I'm finished, vomit. Then, he stuck his head out of the horse carriage and vomited violently. He vomited until he vomited yellow liquid. Chu Yang stepped forward and asked concernedly, Brother Yi, little you, what's wrong with you? Seeing him step forward, such a strong troop from the Yi clan actually took a step back in unison. Even the warhorses took a step back. All of them stared at him in horror. The hair on their ponytails also stood up. The experts on the horses were even more confused. They didn't know what was going on. Like a pendulum, they shivered one after another. Yishiyu liked to do this. Everyone was used to it, and didn't think much of it. Besides, everyone knew that Third Elder Yi was only joking. But now, in front of them, there was a live piggyback. How could this not make one's hair stand on end? Leave quickly. Yishiyu shouted as he vomited violently. Chu Yang said sadly, But you were waiting for me, didn't you want to invite me? Invite your head. Whoever invites you is a bastard. Yishiyu's face was pale. He looked up and saw Chu Yang again. Leave. Chu Yang said concernedly. I still want to marry you, vomit. Before he finished his sentence, Yishiyu vomited violently again. He was out of breath. The curtains of the horse carriage opened and a figure came out. She was wearing a black veil. Just this one look seemed to bring out an inexplicable sense of sorrow. A kind of suppression was emitted. She looked coldly at Chu Yang. Duke, please don't joke with us. Chu Yang was stunned. He said, I don't dare. He thought, this could be Yi Chuchen, right? At this moment, the burly young man had already walked over and pushed him. Leave, what are you doing? Go away. Chu Yang took advantage of the situation and hurriedly turned to leave. He could only hear Yishiyu vomiting violently behind him. No one would have thought that Yishiyu, a demon of a generation, was most afraid of the tricks he was best at. Chu Yang had seen how Zhuge dealt with Yishiyu. Naturally, he knew what Yishiyu's greatest weakness was. But how could Yishiyu know? Seeing that Chu Yang had left, the burly young man wiped his sweat and walked back with lingering fear. After a few steps, he suddenly laughed. Ha! I only saw Third Elder catching people and frightening them until they vomited. I didn't expect Third Elder Yi to have such a day. Ha! Alright, stop vomiting. He's gone. Yishiyu turned his head carefully. He was still trembling. He really left? He really left. The burly young man nodded affirmatively. Yishiyu finally turned his head. He patted his chest with lingering fear. Mother, there's really a demon in this world. Chu Yan walked a few steps and felt that the atmosphere around him was not right. Seeing that Xi Xieching and Chu Le were far away from him, he couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" He was about to walk over. "Don't come over!" The two women shouted at the same time. Xi Xieching looked at him in horror. "Get lost! We'll talk later." Chu Yang smiled bitterly. "That's just a trick, only." Xi Xieching closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She looked at him critically. Then, she carried Chu Le and walked in front without saying a word. Chu Yang smiled bitterly and followed behind. When they reached the entrance of the Orchard Palace, they saw a warrior in green standing there with an invitation in his hand. He said respectfully, "Special Envoy Chu, the law enforcement master has arrived. Tomorrow night, the Zhuge clan will specially arrange a banquet at the Shuiyu restaurant to welcome all of you. Special Envoy Chu, please do come." Chu Yang took over the invitation and said thoughtfully, "Those who are already here, are we all going tomorrow?" 5 days, the third update, the first chapter. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.